Hey guys, tonight we're not sailing anywhere. No oceans, no pirates, no splintery boats smelling like fish and disappointment. Instead, we're heading straight into one of the most intense places early America ever produced. The Texas frontier. Not the movie version, with clean shirts and dramatic sunsets. I mean the real frontier, blistering hot, bone dry, mosquito infested, and filled with people who were somehow both stubborn enough and tired enough to build a wooden fort in the middle of nowhere and call it home. And on the other side of those endless plains, one of the greatest horse riding cultures in history, the Comanche. Fast, terrifyingly skilled, and absolutely capable of appearing on the horizon faster than your brain could process the thought. Hey, is that dust? But before we dive into all that, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if this kind of quiet, slightly weird history really does help you relax. If not, no big deal. Frontier settlers didn't get everything they wanted either, and they still made it through most days alive, somehow. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always 2 a.m. somewhere, and if you're here, you're probably trying to fall asleep to the soothing thought of historical danger from a safe distance. Totally understandable. We've all been there. Now dim those lights. Switch on a fan for that soft white noise. Get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet under a blanket, not because of rats this time, but because a tumbleweed might roll by and try to claim your toes as frontier real estate. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to live out there? Before Texas had cities, before highways, before bug spray, back when neighborhood watch was just someone standing outside squinting at the horizon, muttering, "I don't like how quiet it is today." What did dawn sound like on the prairie? How did families wake, eat, work, and hope they weren't about to hear hoofbeats? What was it like when the horizon began to shimmer, not with heat, but with movement, with speed, with riders so skilled they could fire arrows while hanging off the side of a horse at full gallop? Were settlers brave? Were they terrified? Were they simply too exhausted to process how strange their lives actually were? Tonight, we're going to drift into that world. Not to glorify it, not to dramatize it, but to experience it quietly, safely, gently, from the comfort of your bed. Breathe in, let the modern world fade, and imagine a landscape so big it makes you feel small, and a people so skilled they could cross it faster than anyone thought possible. This is what it was like to survive a Comanche raid, or at least, to feel the moment right before it happened. Settle in, close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the story begin. Chapter 1. The moment the horizon filled with hooves. And now, as we drift deeper into the vast silence of the early Texas frontier, let your breath soften, because the world we're stepping into is wide, fragile, and filled with the kind of suspense that only open land can hold. Picture this. A stretch of pale morning sky, so big and so empty it almost hums. Fields of tall, whispering grass sway in slow waves, glowing gold under the first light. And in the middle of all this quiet, a rough-hewn wooden fort. Its walls are uneven, built from whatever the settlers could cut before their hands blistered. It is not elegant. It is not impressive, but it is theirs, a small island of hope carved into an ocean of open land. Inside the fort, families wake. Coffee boils over smoky fires, boots scrape against dirt. Someone sharpens a tool. Someone feeds a horse. Someone hums a hymn under their breath. The day begins the way all frontier days begin, with more work than hours, and more worry than sleep. But the horizon is watching. At first, it's nothing, just a shimmer, like heat bending the air, a trick of light, a ripple. Then, the ripple grows, spreads, thickens. Someone notices, a hand shades their eyes, a breath catches. The shimmer on the horizon darkens into movement, hundreds of shapes, small at first, then rising, swelling, spreading across the plains like a tide coming in too fast. And then the sound arrives. A low, distant rumble, not thunder, not wind, something rhythmic. Alive, hoofbeats, hundreds of them. The fields that were silent a moment ago now tremble with approaching power. Dust curls upward in pale columns, turning the soft morning light into smoke. The Comanche are coming. Dozens upon dozens, then hundreds of warriors on horseback, riding with a speed that seems unreal to anyone who has not witnessed it before. Hair flying behind them, faces painted with the fierce colors of war and identity. bodies leaning forward in perfect unity with their horses. These are men born in the saddle riders who can fire an arrow at full gallop, twist beneath a horse's neck, or disappear into the wind like ghosts. They move as one, a sweeping wave of motion across the green and gold fields, swallowing the quiet in an instant. Inside the fort, the settlers freeze, tools drop, voices hush. Children are gathered, doors close. Every heartbeat quickens with the ancient instinct that whispers, "Find shelter." But outside, on the open plains, there is no malice in the wind, only purpose. Only momentum. Only the raw, unstoppable presence of a people who ruled this land long before the fort existed. The wooden structure seems impossibly small now, almost fragile beneath the weight of the moment, as if the earth itself remembers which culture belongs to which horizon. But listen closely. This isn't a moment of violence. It is a moment of contrast, of two worlds meeting across a line, drawn in dust. Of fear on one side and absolute confidence on the other. Of settlers clutching at the walls they built, and Comanche warriors trusting the land that shaped them. The dust thickens. The hooves drum louder. The horizon, once quiet, is now alive with motion and color and energy. And in this suspended heartbeat of time, the fort, the families, the warriors, the horses, the grass, the sky, the dust, everything holds its breath together. Because history often begins in moments like this, not with the clash, but with the approach. With the silent understanding that nothing will ever be the same. Breathe with the land. Let the echoes fade. And drift deeper into the story. Chapter 2. When the plains began to move. And now, let your breath slow as we slip back into the open, trembling quiet of 1,836 Texas. A land too vast for most imaginations, too empty for comfort, and too unpredictable for a peaceful night's sleep. Picture it clearly. A slow sunrise smears soft peach light across endless grasslands. The world feels untouched, still waking, still stretching. Dew clings to the tops of the tall grass, turning each blade into a sliver of glass. Birds call lazily. A warm breeze drifts between the mesquite trees. And at the center of this quiet world stands a fort, if fort is the right word at all. It is small, rough, humble, nothing more than timber walls hammered together by tired, hopeful hands. Every board is uneven, every nail hammered in with more determination than skill. It is a shape of survival rather than a structure of strength, a reminder that the edge of the frontier was always held together by hope first, wood second. Inside, the day starts slowly. Someone stokes a fire, someone pours water into a pot. A baby cries, then quiets. A dog barks half-heartedly at a chicken. Footsteps crunch across dry dirt. A settler rubs sleep from his eyes and leans against the fence, calculating how many hours of daylight he has before the work wears him down again. Life is simple, hard, predictable, until the moment it isn't. It begins with a flicker, just a tiny shimmer far across the plain. The kind you would miss if you blinked. The kind that might be nothing more than morning heat rising. But then the shimmer grows, stretches, strengthens, as if the horizon itself is beginning to quiver. One of the settlers notices first. He squints, tilts his head, breath catching in a place he didn't expect. The light changes subtly, then dramatically as the distant shape thickens and rolls forward like a living tide. And then the sound arrives. Soft at first, a pulse, a murmur, a faint drumming beneath the earth. Hoofbeats, not one, not 10, but hundreds. The very ground vibrates a deep, rhythmic thundering that rises through the soil, through the wooden planks of the fort, and finally, into the hearts of everyone inside. The Comanche riders emerge like a storm breaking open across the plains. Hundreds of warriors streak across the grasslands, horses moving with a fluid speed that seems almost unreal. Their bodies and mounts blend into one motion, leaning, turning, sweeping across the earth as if their hooves barely touch the ground. Paint gleams on skin, feathers whip in the wind, sunlight flashes off polished weapons. These are riders shaped by the plains, men who learned balance before walking, men who carried the wind in their lungs and the horizon in their blood. They move with intention, purpose, precision, a long, rolling wave of color and motion that swallows the quiet in seconds. Inside the fort, everything stops. Voices fall silent, coffee cools, hands tremble. Mothers gather their children. Doors slide shut with soft, urgent thuds. No one speaks. No one needs to. The message is written across the land itself. Because this moment, this approach, this swelling roar of hooves on earth, is the kind of moment that changes everything. And yet, listen closely. There is something else here too. A stillness beneath the thunder. An understanding in the soil and sky. Two worlds standing on opposite sides of the same sunlit plain, feeling the weight of each other's presence before anything else happens at all. History is rarely born in the clash. It begins in moments like these, when the horizon moves, when the earth trembles, when every breath is held because the world is shifting. So breathe with the moment, let the thunder settle, and drift deeper into the unfolding story. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 3. The calm before the chaos. Asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of mildly interesting history for sleep. Tonight, we're diving into something more chaotic than your last family reunion. A surprise raid on the Texas frontier in 1836. Yes, folks, imagine a combination of the Wild West, a surprising lack of decent plumbing, and a game of hide and seek, where the stakes are a bit higher than just losing your snack. But before we gallop into this thrilling escapade, let's take a moment to set the mood. I encourage you to dim the lights, put on a fan, and get comfortable, because we're about to plunge into a world where your biggest worry was whether your wooden cabin could withstand a direct attack. Oh, and those mosquitoes? Yeah, they were basically trained assassins. Now, have you ever wished for a personal space bubble, but found yourself in a crowded elevator? Or, how about the challenge of keeping your lunch safe from curious co-workers? Well, imagine living in a one-room log cabin, sharing your space not just with family, but with a fair bit of hay, that odd-smelling goat your cousin insisted on bringing along, and let's not forget the ever-looming threat of a Comanche raid. Talk about close quarters. But don't worry, we'll explore all this while staying cozy and maybe even chuckling a bit. Who knew history could be so absurd? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836 on the Texas frontier, a year when everything could go sideways faster than a tumbleweed caught in a tornado. The sun's barely up, stretching lazy fingers of light across the rugged landscape, and you feel an inkling that today won't exactly be a trip to the spa. Now, let's dive into a particularly surprising morning for one young settler woman, Rachel Parker Plummer. No, this isn't a fancy plumbing firm. Rachel's life is about as far from modern conveniences as you can get, unless you count her cousin Ben's dubious claim that wooden buckets could somehow be repurposed into water heaters. Spoiler alert, it didn't involve much heating. Rachel stands there, wide-eyed, her heart racing faster than a freight train filled with stray cattle. She watches as the initial shock of their rustic calm dissolves into pandemonium, akin to finding a family of raccoons enjoying your outdoor picnic. Except these raccoons are a bit larger and demonstrate less interest in potato salad and more in taking everything you own and possibly your livestock too. With the sound of war whoops in the distance echoing like an off-key choir of overly enthusiastic hawks, Rachel clutches her apron, a fine piece of wool hand-stitched by her grandmother, who famously declared that anything that couldn't survive a Comanche raid probably deserved to be left behind. If only Grandma had thought up a few tips on mental survival techniques. 2. The chaos unfolds around her faster than a soap opera plot twist. Neighbors run about like startled chickens, grabbing whatever they can salvage, while Rachel ponders a crucial question. Should she save the heirloom quilt, or her prized can of pickled huckleberries? Weighing her family's future against her snack stash, she feels a slight pang of panic, rather akin to realizing she forgot to bring a snack while binge-watching her favorite show. As the shouts of men blend with the clattering of hooves like an out-of-tune orchestra, Rachel vividly remembers the subtle pleasures of frontier life, like the joys of waking up to the aroma of fresh cornbread cooking on a hot stone versus dodging arrows and horse hooves. Ironically, those comforting smells are now replaced by a scent entirely new, a blend of fear, sweat, and something oddly like burnt sandalwood. One must wonder, do raiders have personal grooming routines, or is it optional under the circumstances? Over here, an unfortunate lad named Jimmy drops his entire bucket of water right at the worst possible moment. As wake up calls go, nothing screams, start your day, quite like realizing you have no water and are rapidly losing your chances of keeping that last bit of dignity. The raids seem almost surreal, like a bizarre combination of reality TV drama and a history lecture gone haywire. One can't help but think that had TikTok existed back then, there's a solid chance Rachel would have been live streaming her escapades. And here's the moment I make my stand against a group of Comanche raiders. Number, survival theory. But here's the irony. In many ways, while outwardly chaotic, there's an incomprehensible sense of camaraderie and humor amidst the terror. Sure, you may be trying to protect your living space from marauders, but life on the frontier taught a valuable lesson. Sometimes a good gallows laugh with your neighbors is the best weapon against despair. Had you been sharing jokes, it might just lighten the mood, even as someone yells, "Grab the livestock." In retrospect, surviving a Comanche raid requires more than just survival skills. You had to balance your sanity with a spritz of absurdity, mixing a survival instinct with the spiritual fortitude that had you mentally prepping yourself for both battle and tomorrow's breakfast. So there you are, caught in a twist of fate, a magnificent, bewildering, spicy chaos that one wouldn't dare script. Who knew that amid such destruction, laughter could still cling like frayed threads of your grandmother's apron? And as the sun begins to set, casting a radiant glow over the havoc you're witnessing, you might just find a flicker of hope shining through the madness. One quick question lingers in your mind. Would all of this make for good TikTok content? Let's take a moment and breathe, shall we? Stay tuned, because there's more thrilling and mildly entertaining history waiting just around the corner. *** Chapter 4. A cabin worth its weight in cornstalks. ***. Ah, the smell of pre-dawn in a frontier cabin, where every breath feels like a hearty sigh of resignation. Picture yourself nestled in the comfort of a corn husk mattress. Oh yes, you heard right. Corn husk. An ideal choice for a cozy snooze, provided, of course, you don't mind the gentle poke of dried vegetation reminding you of a past life when you fancied yourself a cozy burrito, not a human crisp. As dawn peeks its cheeky little head through the cracks and crevices of your log cabin, you might wonder, did anyone ever think of bringing curtains to the frontier? You've got the morning rays filtering through exterior logs like nature's own disco ball, showcasing all the debris that's taken up residency over the winter. Dust motes flit through the air, reminding you of that friend who can't seem to find a permanent home, constantly drifting, but never settling. The cabin itself is a marvel of rustic architecture. Think IKEA, but make it made of tree bark, with an aroma entirely suggestive of last week's cabbage stew. Your cabin was hailed as a masterpiece of efficiency, if efficiency is defined by leaks, drafts, and a general air of, "this is fine." Imagine the sounds of nature waking up. Your neighbors, bless their hearts, swearing may or may not be rising higher than the sun. A rooster crows, probably because he's never heard of a snooze button. And just as you begin to question your life choices, the excitement settles in like that last slice of cornbread, unexpected but welcome. Now, let's talk about cabin life, shall we? Ever tried to make breakfast with a fluctuating cast of characters? Your relatives, sprightly as they are, seem far less cheerful at this hour. Their face is a mixture of confusion and the slight twitch that comes from discovering that everyone in the family could use a little more me time, preferably on the other side of the cabin. Think about it for a moment. You're standing there, perhaps wearing your best woolen attire, hand knit. Mind you wondering if it might be Monday or just another day of trying not to wake half the neighborhood with your questionable cooking skills. Did you ever think to ask those voyagers how they managed without a proper coffee maker? Because folks on the frontier had shifted their morning ritual to something akin to a bizarre competition in who can drink the most boiled, unidentifiable liquid before it curdles. Breakfast takes on a drama of its own, something akin to a cooking show where the stakes are depressingly low. You attempt to flip corn cakes on a roughly hewn griddle as the flames leap and dance, probably practicing your own dramatic exit should a cast iron skillet ever take flight. As it turns out, those delicacies might just be a little more like smoky mulch than your cousin Marvin's last potato salad disaster. Of course, just as you think you're safe, the unexpected hits. The cabin stillness is pierced by a not-so-friendly whooping think-off-key opera singers during a tornado. And suddenly, you're not just a settler trying to conjure breakfast. You're a one-person circus cast in the lead role of Time's Avoiding Chaos. A one-act play asterisk. Those Comanche raids might seem like a story right out of a dramatic novel. But the truth? They were as real and scary as finding a spider between your pillow and mattress, or realizing the Wi-Fi just cut out. Your first instinct is to join Rachel, our settler heroine, who's totally got her act together, while the rest of them resemble a parade of frightened chickens, flapping about to gather whatever possessions they can. thus establishing the very first frontier version of a yard sale. During the swirling chaos, as neighbors bicker about whether to take the prize quilt or the family goat, you can't help but imagine how those historical moments reflect modern-day life. Ever feel like you're packing for a long trip and can't decide what to bring? Just raise the stakes by about 12 degrees of, oh no, and toss in an impending threat. It's a fun game called Pack Your Life on a Time Limit. Rachel, bless her heart, is clutching that cornhusk quilt like it's a prize-winning art piece because, really, can you put a price on warm blankets? But as she contemplates her survival packing, you wander into a deep existential debate. The quilt is warm, but those pickled huckleberries are basically life's candy. Can you really put a price on possible snack reserves in a time of crisis? Amid all the hoopla, laughter somehow infiltrates the cabin. Yes, laughter, that ancient remedy. Underneath the panic, oddball puns and jokes emerge, proving that gallows humor was as much a lifeline as sturdy timber. The men, braving possible mutilation and emotional breakdowns, laugh at themselves, because really, what else can you do when chaos reigns? Jimmy, maybe next time let's not drop the water while we're being ambushed. Spirals into a shared chuckle amongst the mayhem. Laughter, the clandestine companion of settlers facing potential doom. So, while your cabin is on the brink of turning into a stage for an epic show of unexpected chaos, rest assured, pioneers faced the unpredictability with humor. Remember, folks may have lamented the loss of livestock, but at least no one was stealing family heirlooms, mostly because they were too busy figuring out where to hide precious canned goods from pillaging raiders. As you settle further into this chaotic morning, the glimmers of absurdity still shine through the haze of mayhem. Fighting for survival is essentially embracing life's sweetest oddities. Welcome to the frontier, where every dawn could bring battle-ready warriors, or just another family fight over the last biscuit. Take a deep breath, as we prepare to continue this whimsical ride. Keep your snacks hidden, and your humor intact. It's going to be a bumpy yet mildly entertaining ride. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 5. Waking up on the wrong side of history. Asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys, everything around you feels a bit rougher than your childhood friend's beard. Tonight, we're diving into something more chaotic than your Aunt Edna at Thanksgiving dinner surviving a Comanche raid on the Texas frontier in 1836. You're in for a rollicking ride, where history meets hilarity and survival feels like a game show with unexpectedly low stakes and dubious prizes. Ever wondered how one might improvise a morning routine when faced with impending doom? Spoiler alert, it involves a lot of yelling and questionable choices. Before we leap into frontier life, take a moment, dim those lights, crank up that fan, and get cozy. Just don't get too relaxed. The Comanche are nearby, and they're in the mood for some mild mischief, or a game of how to ruin someone's day. As you settle in, ask yourself, how would you prioritize your possessions during a raid? Your cornhusk quilt, or your prized collection of spoons? Have you ever tried to cook breakfast on an open fire while someone is yelling that your house is about to be turned into a battleground? What's more essential, the last of your pickled huckleberries, or that slightly tacky portrait of your great-great-grandma you have only just met in a family scrapbook? Congratulations, you've just woken up on the Texas frontier in 1836, where the morning light filters through the rough texture of a well-loved wool blanket because, trust me, nothing says home like being reminded of all the terrible choices you've made in life. You peel yourself off your cornhusk mattress with a gracelessness that makes you feel like a confused potato. As the light streams in, it reveals the panorama of your rustic abode. Logs that are one less log than needed, a chimney that swoops like a crooked tower, and yes, a delightful aroma of something identifiable only to those who've survived the unholy mix of burnt breakfast and freshly dug earth. Feel that itchy wool blanket scratch against your bare skin as you shiver and say goodbye to the gentle warmth of the cornhusk. If there was a blanket comfort index, I'm pretty sure this one would rank somewhere near should have gone with an old t-shirt. You contemplate the dramatic changes in life, like how your bed back home makes you feel like royalty, while this rustic masterpiece was crafted by the great artisans of, I thought this would keep me warm. Another layer of confusion unfolds as you ponder breakfast. Would you rather have slightly charred corn cakes alongside a cup of buttermilk that tastes like it could perform its own rendition of a horror movie? As the fire flickers in defiance of your culinary skills, you'll notice how this is far less like brunch with mimosas and fluffy pancakes, and more like a jury duty meeting but somehow worse. Yes, in this life, we pride ourselves on attempting to make the best with the worst. The stillness of that glorious morning suddenly shatters like your chances of a peaceful breakfast when the unmistakable sound of whooping echoes in the distance. It's a noise that makes your stomach knot tighter than your aunt's famous spaghetti. You're not just a settler now, you're an unwilling contestant on Time's Frontier Family Feud, Endurance Edition *. But wait, mustn't let the stress ruin breakfast. Because if there's anything to look forward to, it's the frantic sprint to wrap every single thing you own in a slightly tarnished quilt, because we all know true value is subjective when a raid is imminent. Amidst the increasing chaos, there's a peculiar clarity to be found. People you thought were dull neighbors suddenly transform into the most resourceful packer in a time of crisis while clutching their half-baked breakfast. Your pal Bessie decides to prioritize taking her pet chicken, the one that never stops squawking about her great eggs. Oh Bessie, resting that hope in a cluck-cluck tactic strategy is certainly a choice. You catch a glimmer of desperate determination in everyone's eyes, all the while somehow finding humor in this absurd reality. You overhear your neighbor Jimmy, known for his terrible jokes, turning the fear into laughter. You can't always take your best china, sometimes all you need is to beat the raiders at their own game. Cue the awkward chuckle that sounds more like a hiccup than humor. During this surreal morning, laughter mingles with panic like a failed science experiment gone awry. And while everyone is busy fussing about moving livestock instead of personal belongings, the true pioneers find themselves in charming string of oddball camaraderie even if it comes labeled with a side of mortality. You half-heartedly wonder if perhaps those cans of pickled huckleberries are worth the effort after all. But just when you think the morning couldn't possibly descend any further into delightful chaos, you hear the faint sounds of galloping hooves. You're pushed to figure out who to help. Your husband, desperately trying to shoe the mule, or Grandma Miriam, who's just discovered her missing left sock of course. The one she always kept on, while fighting off historical catastrophes. And as dawn breaks on the Texas frontier, a new kind of awareness envelops you like an unneeded hug. It's not just about survival. It's about how to turn a crisis into an unwelcome comedy performance. Because if there's anything worse than being raided, it's being raided while forgetting to take the homemade cornhusk biscuits. You just can't make this stuff up, can you? Laugh it out, folks, because when history raided breakfast at dawn, you'd better have a punchline ready. So buckle up, because while we've only scratched the surface of the wildly ridiculous life on the frontier, the journey is only getting started. Keep your food packed and your spirits high as we delve deeper into the absurdity of life, where morning chaos meets historical hilarity. ***. Chapter 6. The Cabin Chaos of Parker's Fort, ***. Picture this. A rustic log cabin at Parker's Fort, Texas, in the year 1836. The walls are covered in what can only be described as log chic, and the air smells faintly of smoke, chicken, and perhaps a bit of last night's supper clinging to the crevices like unwelcome guests. As the suns rise to greet the chaos, little James Pratt, the toddler with the seemingly endless energy, decides that this cozy little corner of the world needs a touch more excitement, namely, a game of tag, around the only furniture you own. You, of course, are his exhausted mother, embroiled in a desperate chase to catch the pint-sized whirlwind. "James, come back," you call, your voice laced with equal parts love and the kind of panic that only a parent knows after 6 cups of possibly questionable coffee. Is it even coffee? Or just a mix of whatever was left over in the pot from last week? In the corner, the fireplace crackles like a frustrated child trying to get your attention, sending the smell of charred wood wafting through the cabin. You glance nervously at the kettle perched on the grate, half hoping it will spontaneously serve up a calming cup of tea to help you prepare for whatever wild schemes James has devised today. "Don't touch that, sweetheart," you shout as he dives headfirst into an uneasy pile of corn husks, because naturally, corn husk-related injuries are pretty much a staple of life on the Texas frontier. Let's talk about your cabin. It's cozy, yes, if your definition of cozy includes a roof that might cave in at any moment and walls that seem to have been constructed with nothing but good intentions and an insufficient number of nails. It has been suggested that rustic may not quite capture its essence, perhaps perilously charming is more appropriate. You take a deep breath, feeling the roughness of the log walls, and remembering the time you thought DIY home improvement was a good idea. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. As the toddler zooms past, squealing with glee, you mentally calculate the damage. Will your precious jar of pickled huckleberries survive this? Probably not, but hey, lose some pickles, gain some memories, right? In moments like these, you genuinely ponder how those pioneers of yore would have handled it, maybe tossing small children out the door with a reassuring, "You'll figure it out." Of course, you find this thought both comforting and disturbing, and decide not to implement it just yet. Outside, the morning sun is peeking through the cracks of your makeshift home and illuminating dust particles that pirouette lazily in the air, much like your hope of keeping a clean house. The reality of frontier life means accepting that your place may not hold up to the neat standards of a Victorian parlor. Instead, you've got a delightful blend of dirt, dust, and memories. It's the type of ambience that screams, "I've survived a raid or two, thank you very much." But back to James, delighting in his childhood exuberance like a caffeinated squirrel on a sugar high. He's found a rogue wooden spoon, your best culinary implement, swinging it like a miniature sword. You can almost hear his thoughts. "I am James, conqueror of the cabin. Fear me and my omnipotent grip on this spoon." You reach for the nearest item, an old russet bag filled with cornmeal, half the contents already making a beeline for the floor. "No, not the flour," you shout, as if wishing it not to spill could actually control physics. It spills anyway, creating an artisanal layer of cornmeal that will be the pride of the local mice for weeks to come. In a startling twist of fate, you get an unexpected assist from your neighbor, Miss Bessie, who sweeps in through the cabin door, her chicken Olga tucked under her arm like an oversized fashion accessory. "Need help?" she asks, not even bothering to hide her grin at the morning spectacle. "James, would you care to join in the Great Cornmeal Cleanup Challenge?" You catch a glimpse of shame on your son's face as Bessie dangles Olga teasingly before him. "If you clean up, I will reward you with a chance to pet the chicken," she promises. You can see the wheels turning in his little mind, cooking duties versus chicken petting. The weight of the world, indeed. Just as you're about to begin the great cleanup, the unmistakable sound of whooping drifts in from outside. The belly of every pioneer, husband and wife, drops to the floor as you realize a Comanche raid is imminent. Your heart races faster than those frantic little legs of James, and your motherly instincts kick in. Time for a quick meeting of what to save during a raid. In a heartbeat, everything is chaos. The cabin erupts into a whirlwind of what you should really be prioritizing. You hastily scoop James up with one arm, while the other clutches your precious cornmeal sogid kilt. It's a no good, very bad, terribly impractical scramble. What's important? The quilt, the huckleberries, or the spoon that could somehow be twisted into a weapon? You ponder, gripping the makeshift sword that perfectly represents your survival instinct. "Focus, woman," you tell yourself. It's not just about saving the cat, though honestly, it's probably your turn to find your old cat under the cornmeal somewhere. This moment is all about strategies. Do you upgrade to battle ready or go all out for creativity? Perhaps it's a good day for tossing several items into a basket and convincing yourself that you've made clever life choices. And as the whoops grow closer, you hear Bessie shout from the cross-section of both absurdity and panic, "I'll grab the livestock, you cover the chicken," because frankly, prioritization in a raid comes down to judging which of your possessions are the most ridiculous, a delightful cocktail of chaos that even the Comanche would find amusing. With a heart pounding, your eyes dart around the cabin. From the wooden walls to the dirt floor, across that charming pile of cornmeal. This wasn't just an ordinary morning on the Texas frontier. It was like being tossed into the finale of a reality show, where survival was less about grit and more about laughter, community, and doing your best to ensure James doesn't start a fire while you're dealing with raiders. So take a deep breath, keep that saucepan at the ready, and prepare to tackle the morning chaos with humor and resolve, because if history has taught us anything, it's that surviving a raid while making a mess is just part of the frontier experience. And there, seated amidst the tumult of life and laughter, it reminds you, when the cabin seems chaotic and the world feels wild, the key isn't just survival, it's about making sure you have a good old chuckle while you're at it. You can't make this stuff up, folks. And just like that, we're only just warming up to the whirlpool of absurdity that was life on the Texas frontier. Buckle up as we delve deeper into more delightful chaos ahead. ***, Chapter 7. The Treaty Tango with Elder John Parker. ***. Hey guys. Tonight we're diving deeper into the delightful chaos of frontier life. A place where your neighbor might barge in asking for eggs. and the last Comanche raid is just a fond memory like that unfortunate haircut from high school. Now, imagine this. You're in a cozy fort, holding onto a peace treaty, as if it were the last piece of chocolate cake on Earth. Spoiler alert, it is. But you're not here just to savor the survival skills of Old West folk. You're here to embark on an adventure that's more exciting than waiting for your microwave popcorn to pop. Before we start this wild ride through the Texas frontier, cast your thoughts on things like, what do you do when the neighbor's goat starts munching on your laundry? Or how do you negotiate peace with someone who might be angrier than your teenager on a Sunday morning? Is it awkward when you have to shake hands while trying to dodge a horde of your kids? All valid questions that our hero, Elder John Parker, must answer as he faces a gathering of anxious settlers. So, sit back, dim those lights, crank up that fan, and get comfy, because congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836, in Parker's Fort, where the biggest show in town isn't the latest dancing craze but a fragile peace treaty that everyone hopes won't end up as charcoal in a campfire. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in the fort, casting a gentle glow over the gathered settlers. They were a ragtag assembly of faces, all wearing expressions that screamed, "What now?" Elder John Parker stood in the main room, a grey-haired sentinel of wisdom and calm amidst the brewing storm of anxiety. His hands trembled only slightly as he held up the peace treaty, a document that looked as fragile as a moth's wing, but in this particular moment, it was the only thing standing between them and possible chaos. "Now, friends," he began, his voice steady like a sturdy oak tree amidst the gusts of a Texas windstorm. "This treaty is like the last slice of pie at a family reunion. Everyone wants it, but let's not lose our heads like last time." The settlers exchanged anxious glances, each one of them wondering how they would handle life if they were indeed facing their very own personal pie crisis. There was Martha, her hair pulled back so tight it looked like she was trying to see if her forehead could touch the back of her skull. Next to her sat Gus, fidgeting nervously like a kid waiting for his first dentist appointment. He was already contemplating the worst-case scenario: a raid, a stampede, and who knows, a stolen pie all in one day. "Elder Parker," began Gus, his voice rising in pitch. "What will we do if they show up at our doorstep, demanding tribute in the form of huckleberries and fried chicken?" Though you might think he was overreacting, the way he spoke made everyone lean in a little closer, ears perked like rabbits, near a cornfield. "Relax, Gus," Parker replied, raising the treaty overhead like someone unveiling a triumphant trophy. "This document reflects our commitment to peace with our neighbors the Comanche and our shared goal of cooperation. It's basically the ancient version of the phrase, 'Can we all just get along?'" The room filled with nervous snickers, each settler imagining the past few days of their lives, when negotiating peace felt less like an actual treaty and more like pleading with a cat to not knock over a very expensive vase. Who could really blame them? Living on the Texas frontier brought a host of peculiar challenges, and oftentimes awkward encounters that left everyone wondering if they might need a second career as a diplomat. "Elder, it sounds like you're asking us to hand over not just our chickens but our dignity," Martha interjected, arms crossed in defiance, as if that alone would stop the entire world. Her skepticism was not without merit. Considering the last time an emissary had arrived, he was less focused on treaty talk, and more on how many pies he could consume before anyone noticed. John nodded knowingly. "Ah, yes, Martha. But trust me when I say this, pies will always be there, especially when friendly neighbors bake them. Nobody wants a world where everyone's dangling pies at each other like circus performers." A small collective gasp echoed through the fort, and it was as if everyone suddenly imagined those chaotic pie-hurling contests they'd read about in the funny papers. Several chuckles snuck through the anxious atmosphere as the tension slowly began to ebb. "Now picture this," Parker continued, pacing the floor as if putting on a show. "We send a delegation with this treaty, a few well-chosen folk who can charm even the grumpiest Comanche with sweet words and even tidier pastries. And just like that, we win their hearts, and they leave our living rooms in peace." Gus blinked, still not convinced. "So, let me get this straight. You want us to bake our way to survival?" "Precisely," Parker replied with a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "Imagine Mr. Shaw's chocolate chip cookies, dear heavens. They could sway even the fiercest warrior. Just the smell would have them piling on the compliments faster than a dog chasing a squirrel." Laughter erupted in the room, settling the nerves of worried settlers. There's nothing like a bit of humor to lighten the urgency of potential disaster. As Parker stood there, the great bearer of wisdom, he witnessed a moment of camaraderie begin to ripple through the fort. Hope sparked through their shared laughter, making him proud to be the humble bearer of peace. So, as the settlers gathered around him, full of absurd ideas of cookies and huckleberries, Elder John Parker placed the treaty back down on the table. Remember, folks, it's not just about baking your way through a crisis. It's about connecting, finding laughter amid chaos, and perhaps ensuring your neighbor doesn't throw a pie at you next time. And it was in that moment, where nervousness and absurdity intertwined, that life on the Texas frontier once again proved to be richer and funnier than anyone might have ever expected. Because nothing says survival quite like a cheerfully chaotic treaty negotiation sprinkled with a dash of pie diplomacy. So, brace yourselves, dear listener, because just as the settlers were about to dive into their wild creative baking strategies, who knows what other misadventures lay just around the next corner of this rugged life. Keep listening, and let's see where this culinary path takes us. Chapter 8. Breakfast at the fort where every bite could be your last. Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a breakfast scene that's more chaotic than a cat on catnip. Picture this. You walk into a crowded fort on the Texas frontier, where the morning light sneaks in like an awkward guest, and the air is thick with both anticipation and the scent of slightly burned corn mush. Yes, you heard that right, breakfast on the frontier doesn't exactly scream gourmet. This is a place where the only thing thicker than the fog outside is the tension in the room. Now, you might be wondering, what would a proper frontier breakfast even look like? Is it just a bowl of mush with a side of impending doom? How many ways can you serve corn? With a dash of dusty regrets or topped with a sprinkling of yesterday's worries? And let's not even get started on the question of how long it'll take before someone mentions the last Comanche raid like it's yesterday's gossip. But worry not, dear listener. These are questions destined for the annals of mildly interesting history. So, sit tight. As the settlers shuffled in, clutching their wooden bowls like they were life rafts in a sea of uncertainty, Uncle Silas. There he was, spooning corn mush with the zeal of a man facing a feral cat. Leaning in toward his family, he switched from breakfast banter to what seemed like a clandestine warning more befitting a horror movie than a morning meal. Listen here, folks, he murmured, eyeing the door like a hawk scanning for intruders. This treaty we're clinging to, it's about as solid as a cloud in a Texas thunderstorm. We might as well be making deals with a tornado. This certainly wasn't the motivational breakfast talk that Martha had in mind when she fixed her hair with enough pins to start a small hardware store. The murmurs of agreement rose from the family gathered, settling down like a herd of anxious cows listening for someone to say the word. Raiding. Uncle Silas, began Gus, poised with his bowl. What's more likely? A raid today, or the chance I get to try Aunt Betty's blueberry cobbler before it's stolen by those Comanche? His mouth twisted in an exaggerated frown, pretending to be contemplating the dilemma as if it were national news. Ah, my dear boy, the only thing more inevitable than that cobbler going missing is the wild-eyed look of your sister when she realizes we've run out of sugar for the mush. Silas quipped, dipping his spoon into the corn mush like it held the secrets of the universe, or at least an edible version of it. As the settlers continued to gather around the long wooden table, you could feel the tension mingle with the aroma of breakfast. It was a curious mixture, sort of like the smell of wet dog and burnt toast. Each bite of the mush seemed heavy with the weight of what could potentially go wrong. The kind of breakfast where one bite could make you feel both fortified and deeply existential. You see, these meals were often more about survival than satisfaction. Tension hung thick in the air as settlers exchanged nervous glances, each of them weighing their chances of evacuation against a bowl of mush that tasted suspiciously like regret. If surviving breakfast on the Texas frontier needed a motto, it would be something like, if you're still here at the end of your meal, congratulations, you win breakfast longevity. Do you remember the last raid? Gus piped up again, wanting everyone to relive the suspenseful highlight reel of their collective trauma. Left us with nothing but an oddly shaped slab of morning beef and a sense of existential dread. Right, and as I recall, the last thing we found was Aunt Betty hiding under the dining table, frantically sketching out her inventory of failed baked goods, Silas added, relishing the laughter that rippled through the room. We could start resembling a sitcom at this. Rate one where we run out of desserts and no one makes it past breakfast. Martha shook her head, smirking at the irony of it all. Well, if surviving turns into an award ceremony for the best baked goods, I'd say we're primed for disaster. The only trophy anyone seems to win around here is a heaping pile of burnt mush. Amidst their laughter, Silas pondered the stakeholders of survival and humor. Seriously now, let's not kid ourselves, he continued, eyes glimmering with mischief. Making peace with the Comanche requires more than just our average corn mush. It's about charm, wit, and possibly a dessert contest that would put our quaint little town on the Comanche map. And suddenly, a light air filled the room, allowing those ragtag settlers to breathe easier. Because if there was one thing that united them all, it was that collective understanding that every bit of laughter tasted sweeter than the mush on their plates. Now, whether or not they'd survive breakfast unscathed was still debatable, but as they savored their quirky morning, their laughter blended with anxiety, like the perfect seasoning, forming an utterly ridiculous but strangely comforting concoction. So as Uncle Silas raised his spoon like a wand, floating somewhere between absurdity and survival, it became clear. On the Texas frontier, breakfast could easily pivot from a morning meal into an unexpected riotous gathering. A gathering that would no doubt lead them straight into the soft embrace of sugar-riddled peace treaties and perhaps even a subsequent baking competition destined for history books, if only to keep the laughter alive in the face of chaos. And thus, dear listener, as the dawn faded into the heart of a day full of mild interest, the frontier folk forged ahead, corn mush, the fear of Comanche raids, and all ironically comforted by the knowledge that sometimes survival is just as much about humor as it is about the humble corn mush. Breakfast that they'll grudgingly pound into oblivion. Chapter 9, The Fort, where chaos meets crafty strategy. Hey guys, welcome back to another adventure in history that's more chaotic than a toddler armed with a cupcake. Tonight, we delve into the bustling scene of a log fort on the Texas frontier in the year 1836, where panic reigns supreme and organization is about as likely as finding a unicorn in a hayfield. So grab your pillows, snuggle in, and prepare to learn about defending against a Comanche raid while juggling more drama than a soap opera on a cliffhanger. Now, picture this. You're coiled in your cozy blanket, half asleep, and suddenly you're catapulted into a swirling maelstrom of frantic settlers and scattered belongings. You might be asking yourself, is this an ambush or just my last family reunion? The answer could very well be both, dear listeners. And while you're at it, ponder the most pressing questions of the day. How many chores can you avoid under the guise of defending the fort? If your last can of beans could scream, would you still eat it? And most curiously, did the settlers really think running in random directions counted as an actual defense strategy? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836, right in the heart of the Texas frontier. This is that slice of history where every day is a seasoned mix of anxiety, hope, and oddly enough, corn mush. You open your eyes in a fort surrounded by weathered log walls, listening to the smattering of boots and shouts. Let's set the scene. The smell of sweat, desperation, and, if you squint your nose just right, maybe a hint of that stubborn porridge from breakfast lingers in the air. It's an intoxicating aroma, akin to a fancy candle that somehow just screams overcooked mush. The fort is a bustling hive of activity. Men are diving for weapons, as if they're competing in a bizarre game of frontier twister. The fort isn't just a place of refuge, it's practically an amateur circus where everyone forgot their clown shoes. You look around and see farmers, not warriors, frantically clutching anything they can find that resembles a weapon. It's a wonder no one has taken out an arm or two while attempting to wield pitchforks like swords. Suddenly, a man rushes past you, yelling, "We need more bluster and less confusion," which, considering the scene, sounds like the frontier equivalent of saying more cake and less math. As the chaos unfurls, you catch a glimpse of Old Man Jenkins, who is currently both searching for his neighbors and promptly getting them lost in the process. He frantically waves his cane like a conductor leading a dying orchestra. Oh, Jenkins. The only thing more reliable than his penchant for chaos is the fact that he somehow manages to misplace his glasses during critical moments. There's a good chance that if a Comanche raid were to occur, Jenkins would be the one leading them right into the fort instead of defending it. Now, while you try to navigate this mad flurry of activity, the sound of a horn blares in the distance, a long, mournful note that reverberates through the air like a dog attempting to sing a ballad. The settlers freeze and look at each other with wide eyes, expressions muddled between, "Is this actually happening?" and "Did we even check the porch for intruders?" "Get to your stations," one man bellows, sounding remarkably like he is about to start a team-building exercise instead of a standoff. And just like that, settlers stumble toward the walls, clutching their makeshift weapons, looking more like confused grocery store customers than a united front ready to face an enemy. Scenes unfold like a poorly choreographed dance. Women scramble to gather children, and one ambitious lad on a horse tries to rally the troops. But it appears more like he's auditioning for a new comedy show about frontier parenting. Get your head in the game, Timmy, the mother retreats, half laughing, as she dodges wildly swinging arms and slightly disgruntled goats. Martha, the unofficial fort leader, shouts to quiet the crowd. Listen up, everyone. We might not have the best weapons, the greatest plan, or even enough breakfast to share, but we do have the element of surprise. You can't help but chuckle, because let's be honest, for all their lack of finesse, these settlers have more heart than a bucket full of puppies. If only heart could somehow materialize into actual battle plans. But as a seasoned observer of absurdity, you realize that maybe, just maybe, chaos is a solid strategy on the frontier. After all, emotions and flailing limbs might just confuse the enemy more than any well-laid plan. As you breathe in the smell of fear and determination, and that overcooked corn mush you just can't shake, you start to feel the collective, chaotic spirit of the fort. It's loud, it's messy, and it might not be a pretty picture, but it's spirited. So there you are, dear listener. Amidst the swirling chaos of uncoordinated bravery, and maybe it makes you ponder about your own life. How many times have you felt thrust into a situation where panic and humor were the only options? In this moment of mild madness and extraordinary ambition, you realize that what keeps the settlers going through their bubbling pot of absurdity is not merely the hope of survival, but also a sense of camaraderie, fueled by laughter, even in the aim of chaos. And, as nightfall approaches, with the impending fear of a raid lingering like a storm cloud overhead, the settlers stand their ground armed with spades, pitchforks, and their senses of humor, determined to take on whatever comes next, even if they might just bungle their way through it. Ah, the lovely unpredictability of life on the frontier. And now, dear listener, let those thoughts and images settle comfortably as you drift into the morrow. May your dreams be a delightful blend of chaos and laughter, much like the defenders of the fort. Chapter 10. A tiny white flag of confusion. Now, dear listeners, let's take a moment to pause and marvel at the sheer absurdity of life on the Texas frontier. You're nestled in the safety of the log fort when, out of nowhere, a tinge of white appears in the distance, fluttering like a lost sock on laundry day. But hold on, that's not just any sock, it's a tiny white flag, waggling like it's auditioning for a role in the circus. What could it mean? A peace offering? A signal for tea time? The settlers around you freeze, eyes darting like squirrels at a nut festival, their minds racing with a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Is it a ruse? Are they just faking us out? Quickly, someone check the weather. Could this be a bad sign? The dread is palpable, almost as tangible as the lingering smell of last night's burnt beans. Yes, the true horror of the frontier. Let's dive into the scene. It's like a sudden stillness has gripped the fort as everyone strains to process this new development. Can you smell that? It's a mixture of sweat, fear, and the faint whiff of overcooked corn mush, lingering like an unwanted guest. Settlers squint at the flag as if it's written in an ancient language made entirely of bad puns. What does it mean? Someone whispers hoarsely. Another settler, who seems more confused than a cat in a room full of laser pointers, squints hard. Is it mercy? A trick? Or are they just welcoming us to their potluck dinner? At this point, folks, your guess is as good as theirs, which isn't saying much. The tension crackles in the air, almost like it's auditioning for a high-stakes version of Deal or No Deal. And you can't help but wonder if only they had decided to invite the Comanche for a barbecue instead. Why did we bring pitchforks when we could have made better snacks? You ponder. Imagine the vast possibility of potato salad. Ah, comfort food amid chaos. Amid the confusion, Martha, the unofficial fort leader and queen of unintentional comedy, steels herself in front of the agitated crowd, looking like a military commander convinced that ethical negotiation can somehow save them from imminent doom. Hold steady, she calls out, waving her hands like an octopus trying to solve a crossword. Let's not jump to conclusions. It could just be a peaceful gesture or a prelude to an intense game of charades. Wouldn't that be delightful? How does one mime spirit of the Comanche people anyway? But human nature is hilarious, isn't it? The settlers are drawn in, a mix of dread and curiosity swirling among them like mismatched socks in the dryer. What if they've come to trade? I've had enough beans to last me until the second coming, but I would smash a plate of fresh cornbread and maybe some whiskey. Could we sneak that in? Whiskey? You can practically hear the sails unfurling in their imaginations at the mere thought. A confused silence falls over the group as the white flag continues to flutter, causing both the skeptical and the optimistic to strain harder at this unorthodox situation. Perhaps it's not the Comanche trying to invade their white-knuckled existence, but simply a much-needed escape from chaos, or looking for a bizarre performance art piece featuring terrified settlers groping for survival. Now presenting. In the back of the crowd, Old Man Jenkins stands with an expression akin to someone watching a cat meme for the first time, both intrigued and horrified. "I say we toss a cabbage and see what they do," he shouts enthusiastically. "Cabbage can slay many a foe." What a comment. Only Old Man Jenkins could believe that a fresh cabbage might turn the tide in a standoff. As murmurs echo through the fort, half the settlers are busy discussing tactics, while the other half is surely plotting how to escape to the next level of the existential snack game. I mean, if we were going to die, I'd at least want to die with a spoonful of cornbread in my mouth. Someone comments, visibly distressed by the possibilities of breadless mortality. You can't help but snicker at their plight. Here they are, on the edge of potential doom, arguing about whether they'd rather barter for beans or empty their pockets for a chance at a gourmet meal. Forget the Comanche. Let's make a culinary masterpiece from this madness. As the discussions ebb and flow like waves against a rocky shore, you notice the tension among the settlers morph into a strange camaraderie, the kind forged by adversity and the sheer inability to comprehend how dancing in chaos constitutes a survival strategy. For all their flaws, these settlers are not just defenders. They're like a troupe of misfit comedians stumbling into the spotlight without a script. As the tiny white flag flutters quietly against the swelling tension of the fort, you're left wondering how on earth they'll react. Next, will they send out a peace offering of baked potatoes, or will they instead invite the Comanche for a delightful dinner party, hoping that once you've shared a meal, all hostilities melt away? Whatever happens, it's sure to be amusing. So as you lie here, surrounded by the whimsical absurdities of surviving the unpredictability of life, remember that the Texas frontier isn't just about the fear of raids or the threat of violence. It's about finding humor in the moments when an accidental white flag sparkles like a peculiar diamond in the rugged landscape. And who knows, maybe it's the audacity of hope and humor that prevails, making the settlers not just warriors, but the most unorthodox jesters in a world that desperately needed laughing nights. Now, as you let those images wash over you like a warm hug, allow yourself to drift off into a realm where no tiny white flag could disrupt your dreams, filled instead with comical settlers and splendid feasts. Sweet dreams await, dear listener, and may they be rich with absurdity. Chapter 11. A proposition from the Comanche. Hey guys, tonight, we're diving into something as perplexing as finding your Tupperware lids after a good binge, surviving a Comanche raid on the Texas frontier. Yes, folks, prepare yourselves for a history lesson wrapped in a cozy blanket of absurdity, where every decision feels like waiting for the kettle to boil while the kitchen's on fire. Imagine this. You've just finished your most ambitious and oddly compelling struggle against an overcooked stew. Congrats. You've invented a new texture. But wait, what's that? Uncle Benjamin Parker, with his grizzled grey hair and delusions of grandeur, is striding boldly to the fort's gate, his heart racing faster than a squirrel on caffeine, while Uncle Silas is wrestling with him, shouting, "It's a trap," perhaps with all the conviction of a cat avoiding a bath. Now, before we settle into the hilarity of frontier life, take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment only if you really enjoy this. No pressure though. We wouldn't dare coerce you into anything. Are you comfortably nestled yet? Comfortable? Good. Dim the lights, start a fan for that refreshing I'm not inside a log cabin breeze, and get cozy. As you slip into the mindset of these settlers, ponder this. What was it like to argue with your family about who'd last longer in the face of impending doom? Ever stared at an enemy and thought, should we negotiate over the last biscuit or battle it out? Did they consider carrying a snack bag for emergencies, like modern-day hikers? What makes a decent peace offering beans or biscuits? And most importantly, does one ever truly own a pair of boots that fit well in such tumult? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836, smack dab on the Texas frontier, where the air is as thick with tension as it is with the smell of horse manure and questionable personal hygiene. Picture this. Absence of your usual morning espresso is matched only by the unsettled feeling of dread as the settlers fidget nervously at the fort's entrance. Uncle Benjamin, fueled by a strange cocktail of bravado, coffee, and sheer stubbornness, stares at the encroaching Comanche warriors with a mix of admiration and naivete. It's like watching your buddy decide to provocatively dress like a hot dog at a barbecue. You cheer him on, knowing full well what roast awaits. "All right, folks, I'm going to talk to them," he declares, puffing his chest out like a peacock that's mistaken its reflection in a puddle for a rival. Meanwhile, Uncle Silas wrestles him back. "Do you think they'll appreciate your cologne? Or do you prefer a nice Bardolo? Where's my whiskey at?" The Comanche are a fierce and proud people, resilient as any group you might encounter, perhaps like your neighbor's cat who clearly doesn't care about your life choices. And here's Uncle Benjamin, arms outstretched like he's about to deliver the world's least desired TED Talk on cheesemaking. Let's have a conversation. What's more beneficial, cannibalism or baking biscuits together? We all love a good snack. As the sun glints off the warriors' painted faces, you start to think, maybe there's more to everyone's shared love for carbs than you first imagined. Was it a strategic move to offer breadcrumbs weaving camaraderie in the middle of a potential bloodbath? "Hey everyone, do you like biscuits? What about oatmeal cookies?" Just then, a conspiratorial whisper from the crowd. "If they agree to join us for beans, we'll at least distract them from any imminent doom." Silence falls dramatically, laced with the kind of tension that makes you question everything you thought you understood about diplomacy on the frontier. This could either be the next big cooking show, or a tragic episode of When Settlers Go Wrong. Meanwhile, Silas is at his wit's end. "Benjamin, grab something to wear that doesn't scream, 'Please raid me.' This is not a fashion show." If only they had Pinterest back then. Imagine the hilarious DIY calamities of settler attire trending during raids. The smell of impending disaster looms, mingled with the unmistakable aroma of a half-burnt stew still wafting through the air. You can practically taste the regrets simmering just beneath the surface, and it tastes faintly of biscuits. But hold on, is that the sound of laughter? Yes, folks. Laughter drifts across the crowd, as Benjamin presents an offering half a loaf, wrapped in his best wink and nod attempt at peace. It's like throwing a half-exploded piñata into a serious business meeting. The Comanche arch their eyebrows, exchanging glances, seemingly weighing the merits of bread versus bonfire. Laughter primarily aimed at poor Uncle Benjamin bubbles up. They can't possibly take him seriously. And yet, there's something oddly charming about a town meeting gone wild, featuring Uncle Benjamin as the flustered MC of a bake-off gone horribly awry. Can I interest anyone in a doughy peace treaty? Too much yeast? Great, it'll prove helpful for our next strategy. So, as you drift into the comical chaos of the Texas frontier, conjuring images of banditry settling into bargaining over baked goods, remember, even amid despair, humanity finds itself chuckling and overcoming challenges in absurd ways. The tension might be thick as a cornmeal porridge, but humor is the bread of resilience. Now, let those delightful quirks lull you into dreams that are as whimsical as the absurdity of history itself, where neither conflicting factions nor undercooked biscuits can dim the spark of laughter. Sweet dreams await, dear listener, until we meet again in another tangled web of mildly interesting history. Chapter 12. The eerie silence of the Fort Hay guys. Tonight we're diving into something as quiet and unsettling as that awkward moment when you realize you've been talking to someone's pet instead of the person standing next to you. Picture this. It's the 1,830 seconds on the Texas frontier, where silence hangs thicker than a weekend casserole left out too long. The settlers are pressed against the rough log walls of their fort, listening intently, or as intently as one can while questioning their life choices, including whether the beans from last week were indeed a good idea. Imagine the air, thick with suspense, the kind that makes you wonder if you should be worried or just really hungry. Everyone's straining to catch the faintest hint of the negotiations happening just beyond the wooden palisade. Do you think they're bartering over shoe alligator or just discussing who gets the last cookie? One settles murmurs, their curiosity clearly overshadowing any sense of impending doom. And yes, the stakes are way higher than trading cookies, but the absurdity of it all is almost comforting. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the cast of characters here. We have the ever-enthusiastic Uncle Benjamin, who acts like a child who just discovered a new favorite video game. He's practically vibrating with anticipation as the tension builds like a pot of water, slowly reaching a boil. Then there's Uncle Silas, more cautious and apparently loaded with anxiety, akin to a goat in a dog park. He's half-heartedly suggesting ways to discuss their terms that don't involve any actual risk, like maybe starting a book club instead. Meetings over coffee. Folks, who can bring the pastries? The fort's old wooden walls creak ominously, adding a soundtrack befitting a horror movie. You can't help but think about the settlers' choices. Should I have packed more than just the crust from a half-eaten pie for my survival? What's my plan B here? Arm wrestling? Because that might prove a problem if the negotiation turns violent. As the silence stretches, you wonder whether Uncle Benjamin's bakery negotiations will lead them to peace, or pastries unfit for even a hungry crow. This isn't just any negotiation. It's an encounter with some of the fiercest warriors on the American frontier, the Comanche. Presenting a formidable front, they're armed with simple yet effective weaponry and resolve stiffer than day-old bread. To say they're tough is like saying your current diet of questionable leftovers might not be the best. And how about the settlers' concerns? There's tension in the air, but let's not forget about basic logistics. What will happen if Uncle Benjamin shares his cookie recipe and it's not well received? This is akin to showing up at a party with a gluten-free cake when everyone's looking for chocolate. The stakes, my friends, are legendarily high. The settlers glance at one another, silent negotiations of their own playing out. Oh no, if they raid us, can we organize a bake sale as our last stand? Nothing says. We give up peacefully like an assortment of pastries. Without warning, the air thickens like a badly made pudding. And the settlers gather around. How close can they get to the log wall without losing a limb? Their ears are pressed against the brutal logs that have maybe seen more drama than a soap opera marathon. You can practically hear the thoughts bouncing around. Is their idea of hospitality just a bit different than ours? Hey, how do we even start this conversation? What about offering them a gift, a half-finished quilt, or maybe those boots we can't seem to fit? Because dreaming possibilities while disasters loom is what this atmosphere feels like. Suddenly, you hear a commotion outside. Is it peace? Is it animosity? Or perhaps a debate over who gets to sit in the comfiest chair during a gathering? Benjamin decides, now is the time to take a stand, beaming like someone who's just discovered they can actually play the tambourine. Silas is there, trying to rein him back like a stubborn child hurling themselves toward a mud puddle. You can't just run out there, buddy. This isn't a bake-off. These are real warriors out there. You think they'll be impressed by reduced flour prices? Amidst the exchange of nervous whispers and desperate hopes for survival, or perhaps just slightly better negotiation tactics, the settlers hold their breath. The air stretches tight, filled with a palpable tension that's as heavy as a wool blanket soaked in rain. Everyone is on a timeline, hanging in the balance between violent chaos and heroic diplomacy. But then, just as you brace yourself for the impending drama, you hear the unmistakable sound of laughter. Yes, laughter. Maybe Benjamin isn't entirely lost in the haze of what could be disaster. Could humor fracture the barrier of hostility? Maybe a good old joke about the weather. What's with all this wind? If I wanted a breeze, I'd have saved my last biscuit for the fan at home. The settlers exchange glances, all realizing it's indeed absurd, but perhaps just absurd enough to work. The Comanche could respond with laughter too, sparking an unexpected sense of camaraderie. Because who doesn't love a well-timed joke about biscuits and their mysterious powers as peacekeepers? So as you drift into dreams, imagining settlers balancing negotiations with baked goods, remember, even when chaos looms and enemies surround, laughter somehow finds a way to be the universal language woven into every absurd piece of mildly interesting history. A reminder that, in the spectrum of humanity, no one is truly alone, not even when negotiating parley with snacks. Sweet dreams await, dear listener, and let's meet again where quirks of history continue to unfold. Chapter 13. A Grim Report from the Frontier. Hey guys, tonight, we're diving into something heavier than your uncle's secret recipe barbecue sauce. The pulse racing, gut-wrenching world of the Texas frontier in the 1,830 seconds. Picture it, settlers anxiously pacing like a cat waiting for their human to open the door, while the ever-looming shadow of the Comanche dances just outside their log fort, kind of like that friend who always shows up unexpectedly, just as you're in your pajamas and about to binge on leftover pizza. Imagine yourself standing there, peering over the worn, wooden railings of a fort, feeling more like a barricade procrastinator than a brave defender. The air is thick with anticipation, like when you're in line at the DMV and just know you've got the lucky number that gets called last. As tension mounts, you can't help but wonder how much time it would take for a potato salad to spoil in the heat, or if that last jar of pickles should be rationed as they plot your gastronomical doom. Now, on this fine grim day, our good friend Benjamin Parker has bravely stepped through the gate to deliver news. His demeanor is more serious than a raccoon at a picnic. It's that kind of news, the grab your emergency bean stash kind, as he reports back to the huddled crowd inside the fort. The Comanche are, testing us, he states flatly, raising his eyebrows like they've suddenly developed a mind of their own. They're asking for a place to camp, water, and a cow to butcher. Now, while the settlers are processing this information, no one tells you how to react when faced with the possibility of a cow sacrifice. I mean, how do you even broach such topics? Hey, fellow settlers, would you prefer our neighbor's cow for this impromptu feast? Or should we lean into it and throw a whole cow barbecue? The crowd murmurs uneasily, each member calculating their chances of survival against their desire for iced tea and cookie dough. Do we just give them a cow? Isn't there a bring your own cow, or you lose clause in this arrangement? They look at each other with expressions that range from skepticism to what scientists would later coin as existential dread, as if they suddenly realize they forgot to defrost dinner. Come on folks, this is the Comanche we're talking about. Silas weighs in, ever cautious. You think they'd appreciate a potluck instead? What's the worst that could happen? Maybe they just really love outdoor camping and were hoping to borrow our Wi-Fi. What if they just want a chance to sit around a fire and swap ghost stories, along with some unwelcome company? The sounds emanating from outside the fort become sharper, the distant clop-clop of horses, the rustling of grass, almost as though the Comanche warriors are tuning up for a showdown, or perhaps rehearsing for a community theater production titled Fierce Warriors Gone Wild. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't exactly a recipe for relaxation. As Benjamin turns back towards the fort, his shoulders seem to sink under the weight of unshakable responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, they are armed to the teeth and Times, definitely Times not here to offer us their secret barbecue sauce recipe. He sighs, knowing full well the gravity of their predicament, as he wipes a bead of sweat from his brow. You can almost picture the settlers now, lumbering around nervously, each convinced the next move is as crucial as deciding where to eat dinner while avoiding the dreaded food truck with suspicious options. Who has the culinary diplomacy skills needed for this moment? Who can say, "Here, take a cow, but could we also interest you in our fine selection of cornbread and prairie grilled applications?" In the distance, sounds of laughter, the guffaws of the Comanche slicing through the tense atmosphere like a comically misplaced banana peel might in the middle of a serious debate. Only here, you have fierce warriors debating the best way to roast a cow instead of discussing the local gossip about prairie dogs. Everyone, aim for the cow's times other times side. Surely we can outsmart this situation with humor. Silas attempts yet another idea, desperately trying to think of a solution that pushes any possibility of violence. Perhaps the settlers should just host a potluck. Let's invite them in. Maybe share a recipe or two. I heard the lady down the way makes a mean brisket. But in reality, all of this absurd dialogue humor seemed utterly inadequate. The settlers standing inside the fort realized they were not just friends, sharing snacks, but people trapped in a slice of history thick as molasses, and more precarious than a toddler with a crayon on a pristine wall. As the day dragged on, and the shadows grew longer, a grave sense of uncertainty lingered in the air, thick as double cream in a churning churn. The settlers were all weighing their options, like calculating their leftover takeout, not entirely certain what was going to hit them first, a raid, or the realization they did, indeed, forget to pay their cow taxes. In a moment of desperation or outright absurdity, the settlers wondered not just if they could avert a disaster, but if they could make the Comanche laugh. Why not show them a good old-fashioned Texas hoedown? Surely that would brighten up their day. Who wouldn't want to kick up their heels after asking for a cow? And somewhere out there, across the prairie, the laughter lingered, casting a strange lightness on what might turn out to be a dark and tumultuous page in their history. A reminder that even on the brink of chaos, a chuckle may just serve as a spark of hope. So, dear listener, the next time you find yourself in a particularly sticky situation, like perhaps at a family BBQ gone disastrously wrong, remember Benjamin Parker, Silas, and the settlers trying to negotiate their lives away. With a side of cow, humor, and the occasional reckless idea, because the real history often hides behind a curtain of comedy waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 14, The Final Warning. Hey guys, tonight, we're about to dig deep into something more high stakes than a game of musical chairs at a family reunion where everyone's overly competitive. The world of frontier life in 1836 Texas. Imagine yourself as a settler in the wild, wild west, where the only thing more dangerous than a Comanche raid is trying to find out what time it is without a watch. So, grab your feather pillows, dim the lights, and settle in as we embark on this historical adventure, a journey fraught with danger, laughter, and a hearty helping of absurdity. Notice how that creaky floorboard sounds. Yeah, definitely not your imagination. But hey, it keeps it real, right? And speaking of being real, have you ever experienced the heart-racing terror of someone stealthily approaching your house, only to discover it's just your neighbor coming to borrow some sugar? Or possibly worse, your cat deciding it's the prime moment for an unexpected ambush? Well, dear listener, buckle up, because the settlers in Texas didn't have sugar or house cats to soothe their nerves. They had risk and panic, a volatile duo if there ever was one. Now, let's throw you into the thick of it. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836, somewhere on the vast, dusty expanse of the Texas frontier, where the cowboys are not yet on their horses, and being given a friendly warning feels suspiciously like a scripted horror movie. As the sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, ominous shadows that might as well be wearing sombreros, you find yourself standing on a weathered porch at a settler's homestead. Close your eyes and hear it, the rustle of leaves, the distant sigh of the wind, and the sound of a father's voice breaking through the fog of quiet, tension buzzing in the air like an overly caffeinated bumblebee. Let's zoom in on that father. Let's call him Henry, and his daughter, little Sally, who is more focused on twirling her pigtails than the impending doom surrounding them. Henry stands there, his face stricken with seriousness, the undeniable mask of a man who's seen more than his fair share of frontier drama. You know the type, the sort who could wring drama from a flat tire and a squirrel. Listen up, Sally, he says, squinting as if he's trying to read the future in the clouds. If you hear shooting, I want you to run. Don't look back. His finger jabs toward the prairie like it's a compass pointing towards safety. You can almost see the scenario unfolding, like a poorly staged school play where everyone forgot their lines. Run, don't look back. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? But in the heat of a crisis, what does run even look like? Is it a slow jog, the kind you might use when trying to catch the ice cream truck? Or is it a full-on sprint, as if a particularly angry bee has decided you're its target? Sally, however, is still focused on her hair. But what if I trip? She asks, because it's clearly not a moment for an existential crisis on tripping etiquette during a Comanche raid. What do you mean, what if you trip? If they shoot, just run, Henry insists, flapping his arms around like he's trying to land a spaceship with a side of dramatics. Every bit of him radiates anxiety, and honestly, he could probably give a professional actor a run for their money. The fear is that tangible. Look, Henry says, all grim and grave, make your way to the barn. You know, the one where the hay is probably more comfortable than your bed anyway. We can't have you getting captured because you decided to do a pirouette on the way there. You can feel that settled weight in the air, a tension so thick it could practically take a seat at the dinner table. The stakes are higher than a mountain goat on a caffeine high, and stakes are something settlers had to deal with constantly. Unlike today, where the worst threat usually comes from forgetting to mute a Zoom call during an awkward moment. Back then, it meant real danger, where every day felt like being on a reality show titled Survivor, Texas Edition. As Henry looks farther into the horizon, you can almost picture the Comanche riders appearing like unwelcome guests at a birthday party, you know, the ones who bring fruitcake and awkward small talk. Maybe they want to borrow a cup of salt. However, the problem with asking for ingredients, when armed with lances and arrows, could get messy really fast. His warnings echo in the quiet stillness around you, but they're mixed with the absurdity of the moment. Here's a father standing, seemingly ready to juggle flaming torches while negotiating survival tactics in a world where the only safety net is the vast Texas sky. Henry, sensing the gravity of the moment, lowers his voice to what he thinks is a dramatic whisper. And for the love of all cows, remember the hedgerow. What hedgerow? And why? Does it sound like a secret code for avoiding danger on the prairie? Is there a map of hedgerows somewhere involving scavenger hunts, and unexpected snacks. You can imagine Sally, wide-eyed and lost in her own thoughts as she tries to process the wisdom of run, don't look back, while the father continues his monologue. Each word seems to float through the air, like a feather caught in an unseen breeze. Just focus on running, and we'll figure it all out later, Henry proclaims, while probably wondering if he should have put on a dramatic cape for extra flair. That's the thing about parental advice on the frontier. It's often a mix of panic, pragmatism, and a sprinkling of hope. And there you are, caught up in their world and the throes of impending chaos, where this may be just another page out of history, but it's certainly not one for the faint of heart. So as you lay down to rest tonight, remember Henry's frantic instructions. Consider how sometimes the best plan in the face of adversity is picking up, running, and hoping the only thing that's left behind is a touch of laughter in the wake of chaos. Chapter 15. The Packing Panic. Hey, guys, tonight, we're diving into a moment that's wilder than a squirrel on a caffeine high. The chaotic thrill of preparing for a Comanche raid on the Texas frontier in 1836. Picture this, you're not just packing a picnic. You're essentially shopping for survival while the clock is ticking faster than a toddler at a candy store. So, if you're comfortable, dim those lights and put on a fan to simulate the breeze you probably wish was also a safety feature. Seriously, what do you think these settlers thought when they woke up one lovely morning, only to realize they had to hoist their daughters into the hayloft because some very determined Comanche warriors were stomping through the tall grass? As you lay back, ponder this. What times would you grab during a sudden evacuation? Your phone, your favorite snack, or maybe your cat only to find out she's coiled up in the most inconvenient spot on your nearest tree? Do you think settlers had to negotiate with their children on what items made the cut? Sorry, Sally, but you can't bring your doll. Survival is all about priorities. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1836, and your morning routine now involves deciding between a knife and a questionable moldy loaf of bread. As you shake off the dust from your new old-timey existence, let's zoom in on our brave mother, Clara, her adrenaline kicking in like she drank 4 shots of espresso. As the first hints of chaos blanket the homestead, you witness Clara's hasty movements, a frantic choreography of survival. She stands over her makeshift wooden table, frantically packing a small, crude bundle of essentials. A rough blanket that makes your old college quilt look like designer fabric, a knife with the grace of a toddler's crayon drawing, and enough dried food for a family of raccoons. Stay close to me, darling, she whispers fiercely, her words trembling in the air like a poorly tuned guitar. You can feel the tension, like electricity sizzling between them. We have to hurry, the fort isn't far, and the last thing I want is to explain to your father how you got captured because you were too busy admiring the bugs. You can almost hear young Sally's thoughts. But Mom, what if I want to catch a butterfly first? I'll make it quick, as if picking up a butterfly mid-raid is a totally reasonable distraction. But let's be honest, courage, at the moment, often masquerades as sheer panic. The air around Clara is thick with unease. You can smell the sweat mixed with the faint aroma of the dirt floor, adding an earthy undertone that's simultaneously grounding and nauseating. She rips at the dried jerky, tossing it into her bundle with wild enthusiasm, as if it might magically transform into an energizing snack mid-exodus. I'll pack all the food we can carry. If we're going to run for our lives, at least we ought to have something to chew on, right? The barn door creaks ominously, a soundtrack of impending doom in a bad B-movie. What if you trip? Henry had warned. And look at poor Sally, who's clearly more preoccupied with twirling her pigtails and contemplating the intricacies of the barn's cobweb aesthetic. This, perhaps, was what you'd call a formative moment in her understanding of galloping towards safety. Make a mental note of this running while maintaining a fabulous hairstyle, whilst clutching a bundle like a bag lady in a bad sitcom takes an extraordinary amount of skill. But for Clara, this is no laughing matter. The stakes are higher than the time you tried to bake a souffle and nearly burned down your entire kitchen. Hold on, I need to grab my spectacles, she suddenly exclaims, dashing across the room with the exuberance of a wedding planner, sprinting for the bouquet toss. You have to hand it to her. Even in the face of danger, practicality runs deep. Because who doesn't want a lovely pair of spectacles while facing a marauding band of Comanche? Think of them as the goggles one might wear before attempting to make a particularly dangerous smoothie. As the shadows elongate outside, like a bad prom dance partner, Clara tosses in a few more items. The odds and ends she considers essential for survival, like a half-open jar of pickles, because you never know when you'll need a snack. Just grab what you can. If we make it to the fort, we'll sort this whole survival kit business out later, she shouts, launching into panic mode with the grace of a gazelle on roller skates. As Sally looks up, her eyes wide with confusion, Clara realizes the little girl's entirely fixated on a family portrait that now seems to laugh at the absurdity of the moment. That's right, let's just stop and recollect our memories, while Comanche ride in looking like a particularly aggressive version of the local high school football team. Clara shakes her head, redirecting her focus back to the present, where the stakes are higher than a prize turkey on Thanksgiving. Her heart races, and the thoughts cascade through her mind. Can we survive? What will we face? Will there be any pickles left for dinner afterward? And just like that, you hear the distant war cries piercing through the air like alarm clock chimes on a Monday morning. The sound tugs at the corners of your mind, reminiscent of the last 2 minutes of a nail-biting sports match or worse. A clear signal that today's event schedule has encountered a serious interruption. With a huff of determination, Clara grabs Sally's hand, clutching it tightly like a lifeline as they prepare to bolt toward the barn. The time is now, and her resolve is surprisingly inspirational. In her eyes, you can see the blend of fear and fierce love, a combination more powerful than anything you'll find in a superhero movie. In this moment, amidst the chaos and confusion, lay the undeniable truth. Living on the Texas frontier wasn't just about survival. It was about heart, humor, and a dash of absurdity wrapped in the rough edges of history. And as they sprint into the uncertain embrace of adventure, one can only hope they'll look back and chuckle someday when they're not on the run. Perhaps while recounting tales over a campfire with a side of slightly sad pickles. Chapter 16. The Brink of Dread. Hey guys, tonight, we find ourselves on a thrilling and slightly terrifying journey that's more chaotic than a cat fighting a vacuum cleaner. The approaching Comanche raid on the Texas frontier in 1836. Buckle up, because you're about to witness survival tactics that make your last IKEA assembly look like child's play. Now, as you prepare for this wild escapade, let's consider a few important questions. What would you choose to negotiate with a Comanche warrior? Your family heirloom or the last slice of pizza? How would you explain to your pet turtle why you're suddenly running frantically through a field? And do you even have any butterflies left in your collection to distract the enemy? Tonight, we're pirouetting into the past, where danger lurks like that last piece of broccoli in the back of your fridge, just waiting to surprise you. So, cozy up, dim those lights, and let's traverse back to a time when everything was a little rough around the edges and a whole lot more absurd. Congratulations, you've just woken up on the Texas frontier, and it's one of those mornings where you think, is today really the day I need to outfit myself for potential enslavement? Spoiler alert, it is. Now, with your heart racing like a rabbit on roller skates, let's find our heroine, Clara Parker, frantically peeking through a gap in the wooden wall. You can see her, eyes wide, peering past the splintered edges, as she watches her husband, Benjamin, bravely approach a group of stern-looking Comanche leaders, who must be thinking, what sort of circus act is this? The warriors spread out silently like a well-practiced team of ninjas preparing for a surprise attack. Clara's breath hitches, not just in fear, but because she suddenly remembers she forgot to pack her favorite charm necklace. Oh well, charm has never been favored against arrows. The atmosphere around her is thick, the scent of the dusty homestead, mingling with the faintest whiff of cattle. It's a delightful bouquet of impending doom, you might say. Just beyond the wooden wall, Benjamin stands, clutching his rifle like a lifeline as he tries to channel his best heroic self. Except, admittedly, he looks more like a bewildered sheep than a valiant knight at this moment. What exactly is running through Benjamin's mind? Maybe he's negotiating for time, or perhaps he's simply trying to avoid stepping on the kind of less than gentle prairie detritus that seems to leap out at one's feet in moments of utmost seriousness. It's like playing a weird game of hopscotch while wearing shoes 5 sizes too small. The fear is palpable as Clara watches him, frozen between admiration and sheer panic. As Benjamin opens his mouth to speak, the silence turns into an orchestra of heartbeats, each thump loud enough to rival even the strongest of marching band performances. The group of warriors stares, glancing at each other with expressions that could only be described as a mix of curiosity and slight confusion, like they just got hit by a truck that promised a 3-hour lecture on the importance of needlepoint. Clara's fingers tremble with the thought of what could happen next. What would you do? She ponders. Shall I create a dramatic distraction, or should I bake them some cornbread and hope for the best? Unfortunately, cornbread isn't readily available in a crisis, and there's just the urgent sense that Benjamin might have tried to barter for time the same way he barters for the best piece of meat at the market. It's then that you realize Clara must be part superhero. Why? Because despite the gravity of the situation, she finds herself instinctively tweaking her hair, because in crisis moments, looking after your appearance can feel oddly reassuring. Just a quick adjustment, and voila, a befuddled hero amidst a century of chaos. Perhaps she has aspirations of becoming a frontier, Instagram influencer, after all. But as the tension builds, Clara's mind spins into overdrive, with thoughts of how she might orient her own bargaining skills if Benjamin doesn't come through. Would she negotiate with the Comanche by belching a tune from her favorite folk song? Hey, fellas, how about a sing-along instead of a sword fight? Tricky situation, but you never know what might win them over. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Comanche warriors begin to huddle closer, forming an ominous circle around Benjamin, and Clara can swear they're definitely sharing a laughing fit, probably over a poorly executed joke about a farm hat and a goat. The silence thickens again. This is like watching a rickety soap opera, with everyone waiting for the next scene that could either go terribly wrong or dramatically save the day. As Clara watches, the knots in her stomach tightly twist together like poorly tied shoelaces. She can almost hear the whispers of risk and resourcefulness, floating through the air, mingling with the tension that's building faster than a pot of water on the stove. Will Clara swoop in and save the day with the kind of bravado that upcoming history books will write about? Hold on, Sally. She suddenly calls to her daughter, who is curiously peering around the barn. We'll need to make a hasty exit if things go south. Unlike those Comanche, we can't rely on a strongly worded letter of complaint. And with that thought, Clara steadies her grip on the wooden wall. A silent pact with herself, because sometimes survival is just about putting one foot in front of the other, all while cracking jokes to lighten the absurdity of it all. In a world where nothing is guaranteed, her heart brimmed with hope, despair, and possibly a fondness for baked goods that may save them in this wild contradiction of history. So there they are, standing on the precipice of chaos in this Texas saga, like characters caught in a ridiculous, half-baked version of Shakespeare that's more likely to end in laughter than tragedy. Let's see how the rest unfolds, shall we? Chapter 17. The Clamor of Armageddon. Picture this. It's a serene Texas morning in 1836. The sun is grinning with a little too much enthusiasm, casting an optimism that feels almost blasphemous considering the impending doom lurking at the fringes. And just when you think it's safe to admire the view, Uncle Silas, who possesses a voice remarkably akin to that of a startled goose, bellows like a man being chased by a particularly irritable bear. Port men, alert! There's trouble brewing, and I'm not talking about my latest batch of sourdough. Your heart does a somersault that would make any acrobat proud, and you glance anxiously at Clara, whose fortitude mirrors a deer caught in headlights. Are those the sounds of galloping hooves? Or did Uncle Silas accidentally kick one too many pots? The air crackles with tension, like the feeling you get right before you attempt to navigate the self-checkout line at the grocery store without the assistance of a polite cashier. As Clara's stomach flops around like a confused fish, this is when you remember this isn't just another day at the ranch. The Comanche are advancing, and their idea of a good time usually doesn't involve idle chit-chat and pie. It's more like an extreme sports demo, featuring heritage violence with a side of plunder. No thanks. You can picture it now, a bunch of Comanche warriors weaving through the Texas grasslands with the grace of gazelles, all while your watchful eyes are glued to Uncle Silas. What's he doing? Right, shouting like he's training for a role in some avant-garde opera. To arms! Prepare the defenses! And all while half the fortified men scramble about like headless chickens, because let's face it, organization wasn't exactly the frontier's strong suit. Suddenly, they're not just idle fort men. They're swept up in a chaotic frenzy that makes supermarket Black Friday sales look positively civil. A rifle clatters against the wooden beams as someone stumbles while grabbing their gear, and you can't help but think, do these guys possess any concept of personal space? The noise reaches a crescendo of panic, akin to an amusement park ride gone wrong, the kind where your brain begs you to pull the emergency brake but your friends crank the joy level dial to 11. But helplessness? Not Clara's style. She pulls herself together like a woman powered by caffeine and a protective instinct. Calm yourself, Sally, she shouts over the din. If you see anything that looks like trouble, remember, it's worse than your cousin's dance moves at the last family reunion. A distant, chilling war cry rings through the air, and your imagination starts dancing like it's auditioning for a reality TV show, each thud of a horse's hoof rattling your senses. You squint through the gaps in the wooden palisade. This is no casual visit. The Comanche aren't here to play tiddlywinks. You might as well be staring into the dark abyss of your laundry basket, which, incidentally, is probably just as terrifying. As the sky darkens with the shadow of riders, your ears strain to catch any semblance of conversation happening beyond the wooden walls. You know, I once underestimated the power of a good ambush, one Comanche warrior might quip to another, not quite grasping the tension of the situation. What's his name again? Benjamin. Let's see if his mother raised him to be useful out here. The absurdity of it strikes you. It's like watching a Shakespearean comedy unfold, where every actor is overly dramatic and clueless. Just imagine Clara, with her morning curls standing on end, trying to negotiate with wild savagery while explaining the finer points of etiquette. Excuse me? Before we proceed with this whole declaration of war, can I interest you in freshly baked cornbread? Just as laughter threatens to bubble up, a dreadful wave washes over you. It's the wave of realization. Weapons are poised, lines of demarcation drawn, and Clara's dream of suddenly becoming a renowned figure in frontier diplomacy hangs in the balance. Great, you think. All we need now is for someone to yell to infinity and beyond, and we'll be entirely lost to history. But suddenly, amid the unprecedented chaos, gusto overflows in Clara. She knows her next move, instinct kicking in like a coiled spring, pushing past fear. It's time for a strategy, she calls out, garnering all the attention like a very enthusiastic coach at a scrappy sports team. You can almost see Uncle Silas puffing up with pride. Maybe this woman can save their hide after all. Scrambling across the barricade, Clara seeks to delegate tasks. You, bring me flour, probably not for bread, but as a distraction, and someone get the chickens. We'll need them for, well, reasons. Flustered grins break across the faces of the men. After all, who wouldn't get behind a wild-eyed woman promising chaos with a side of poultry? But then, just as tensions reach a boiling point, all thoughts of impending doom give way to another stark reality. Just remember, Sally, Clara echoes. If things go south, we'll make a run for it. But for now, keep your jokes at the ready. We want them laughing, not fighting. And there you have it, the absurdity clashes with reality, humor colliding with the dire circumstances at hand. Despite the clamor of a Comanche raid, sometimes a little levity is the best form of defense. Which is good, because with the stakes as high as a kite in a windstorm, you're going to need all the laughs you can muster. And with that, let's see how Clara's plan unfolds, shall we? Chapter 18. A mother's grit and the confused toddler. Picture it. A Texas frontier homestead, clinging to the notion of being a safe haven. But that notion feels as fragile as a dust mote dancing in a beam of sunlight as Clara, yes, our brave heroine, clutches her tiny son, James Pratt, tighter than if he were a piece of important paperwork. The toddler, who might as well have been made of squirming jelly, flails in her arms, his innocent, bewildered eyes mirroring the chaos unraveling just outside their wooden sanctuary. What does it feel like to be a frontier mother in such a moment? It's like trying to decorate a cake during an earthquake, while simultaneously fielding annoying questions from a toddler like, why is the sky not falling? Or, are we having cake for dinner? Sorry, kiddo, but tonight's menu is plundered corn, or if we're feeling extravagant, wild grass. And now, as Clara grapples with overwhelming fear, she must also negotiate the mental gymnastics of toddlerhood. Imagine the scent of dust, sweat, and a smattering of rising panic infiltrating the air, mingling with the sweeter aromas of freshly baked bread. If only the oven wasn't in the middle of a showdown. She can hear Uncle Silas bellowing about galloping trouble, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she seizes the absurdity of it all. Why can't I just be worried about finding a penny on the floor, like a civilized person? Clara thinks, endeavoring to maintain her grasp on sanity, while firmly against the idea of a full-blown Comanche raid. Suddenly, the initial panic is disrupted by a particularly loud plea from James, who appears oblivious to the urgent nature of the world unraveling outside. He gazes up at Clara and asks, in a voice higher than a rabid cricket's, "Mummy, why are we being brave? Can I be scared instead?" An excellent question, James. It's like asking if there's a chance of rain when the sky is already being dramatic, yet Clara, bless her smoldering resolve, tightens her grip on her wiggly son. He feels warm against her, a heartbeat of innocence fluttering chaotically like a trapped butterfly. Their love can withstand arrows, but what about the occasional spilled milk? We're brave because we have to be, my little squish. She parrots back like a mother warrior from a cheesy adventure tale. As the distant war cries echo, she wonders how many mothers would brag about their bravery on social media if they had Wi-Fi. Spoiler alert, 0. The air grows tense, thick with adrenaline and the potential for lowest-rated reality TV show situations. Okay, Clara, she thinks, time to play the mom card. She glances down at James, whose face bears an expression suggesting that he's contemplating the meaning of life and why his toy horse hasn't decided to magically ride itself yet. Just think of it this way, darling, she says with the kind of calm that only a mother facing impending doom can muster. What if your stuffed horse was in trouble? We'd rally together, right? Like the Avengers of stuffed animals, propagating hope in a climate of chaos, a superb blend of gallows humor and love. A sudden wave of shrill screaming punctuates their moment, a sound not unlike your last birthday party, where your uncle thought he could impress anyone with his dance moves. But no, this is not a party. This is a mighty call to arms. Your jovial frontier-style barbecue just took a very sharp right turn towards horror movie. As Clara peers out from behind the heavy wooden door of their modest abode, she notices shadows dancing with an ominous carelessness. Poised in the brilliance of the Texas sun, the Comanche warriors look like a cross between an Olympic equestrian team and a band of hyperactive puppies. What kind of chaos are they even planning? She wonders while trying to keep half an eye on her son. Can they not take a moment to discuss strategy instead of being so, well, majestic? She knows it would be futile, perhaps even rude to wave at them while holding a toddler. Totally unprofessional, Clara. Gotta keep it together. Meanwhile, James, with his toddler enthusiasm for life, giggles loudly, oblivious to his mother's fear as he beams at the incoming chaos like it's the world's worst rodeo. Look, Mommy, horses! They're so fast! It's in this strange juxtaposition, fear colliding with innocence, that Clara finds a flicker of determination ignited by her child's naive enthusiasm. Somehow, that spark feels like a future meme. When your kid thinks you're at a horse show, and all you wanted was a quiet night. And thus, the absurdity spins into overdrive. As the Comanche war cries grow louder and closer, Clara steels herself against the onslaught of chaos, a strategy forming inside her mind. Time for some frontier diplomacy. If I can just get them to pause for a moment and take interest in my cornbread recipe. She could almost imagine a Comanche warrior politely interrupting her with a raised hand. Excuse me, madam, but do you have grain-free options? Not today, folks, not today. Clara gathers what composure she has left, finds her mum voice, the one that can silence even the loudest toddler tantrums, and prepares for whatever wild situation awaits her. James, oblivious as any toddler can be, points animatedly at the approaching chaos. Mommy, can we ride the fast horses too? The sweet innocence of youth, blissfully blissed out and heartfelt. Ah, to be a child of the frontier, where adventure lurks behind every sweeping hem of your mother's apron. And as Clara gathers herself and her famous cornbread recipe, just in case her thoughts flit to her husband, wherever he might be, possibly constructing an overly elaborate fortification made out of stale bread loaves and good intentions back at home. Because that's how frontier life is, really, surviving the chaos of half-planned raids and unfiltered toddler commentary, one day at a time. Ah, the ultimate irony. All this madness might just make for the most memorable bedtime story ever, if everyone survives. And so, dear listener, let's find out how Clara transforms from a worried mother into an unlikely hero amidst the madness, all in the name of preserving a few slices of cornbread and, maybe, a toddler's sanity. Shall we? Chapter 19. The Pregnant Dash of Desperation. As Clara peers outside her wooden fortress, the scene morphs into a chaotic ballet of chaos and impending doom. She is caught somewhere between being a frazzled mother and an unintended leading lady of a particularly bad Western film, which is probably the worst role anyone could have when a Comanche raid is in the air. Picture this. Your innocent cravings for a warm cup of tea have morphed into a heightened demand for survival, as the air shimmers with impending chaos. Much like a microwaved burrito that's just a bit too eager to explode. Run! Her mother's voice rings out, echoing through the dramatic tension like a fanfare in an awkwardly staged musical number. Clara's internal monologue is far less graceful. Running while pregnant, oh sure, let me just hula hoop my way across the Texas frontier. It's like trying to sprint while wearing a particularly obstinate beach ball strapped to her belly. And believe me, it's not winning any Olympic medals today. The ground is uneven, a treacherous mix of rocks and dirt that decidedly doesn't feel like the smooth pavement you dream of for your magical escape. In fact, it's more akin to an obstacle course designed by a particularly cruel deity craving amusement. Each step she takes feels like a negotiation between gravity and her center of balance, which has inexplicably decided to go on vacation. Clara stumbles, her arms flailing like the windmill of fate, grasping at the hope that her mother, with a voice that could shatter glass, is still somewhat close behind. As Clara makes her awkward exit, her thoughts race. What's the worst that could happen? She winces at her question. That's like asking, what's the worst that could happen on a blind date with someone who thinks washing hands is optional? The answer is, quite a lot. But logic is a blunt instrument in a moment like this, and so she pushes forward, propelled by the primal urge to survive. The wild cries of the Comanche warriors reverberate through the air, shattering the serene facade of a peaceful homestead, proving yet again that nothing is ever as calm as it appears. Was that a war cry, or did someone just step on a squirrel? She wonders briefly, half expecting a raucous band of warriors to come loping over the hills like eager dogs. It truly is the kind of situation where one's options are limited. Should she practice her best impression of an acrobat, or make a break for safety like a decidedly ungraceful gazelle? Clara, keep moving, is her mother's insistent voice, mingling eerily with the sounds of chaos as she imagines being pursued by not just any typical raiders, but the kind who ride horses more gracefully than she can even walk. It's almost laughable, if not so terrifying. Clara's mind flits back to her childhood, where she once wanted to be a ballerina, but she's pretty sure this ragtag run would result in a solid F in any dance class. Clara's breath quickens, her heart pounding in sync with her frantic steps. She can't help but notice the silhouette of her future child, cocooned and unknowing, as she sways awkwardly. You're taking the belly dance experience too literally, child, she thinks wryly. Could you perhaps refrain from the pregnancy antics while we escape danger? But of course, this is not how life works, especially on the frontier. Mommy, are we playing tag? James's voice pierces through the storm of tension, innocently baffled as only a child can be while chaos reigns around. Sweetheart, this is no time for games. But if we must play tag, let's at least make sure we aren't it when the Comanche find us. She quips inwardly, channeling every ounce of absurd humor she can muster. Each step is punctuated by her own internal monologue. Running across rough frontier land should win an award for the most unhelpful function ever. It's like jogging on a plate of tacos. What have I even done to deserve this? She glances back only to see the blurred notion of safety shrinking further away. If she was being chased by a pack of enthusiastic kittens, rather than seasoned warriors, it might almost feel comical. The screams of her mother pull her back to focus. Keep going. You can do it. And that motivation, however ridiculous it sounds, kicks her into high gear. I can do this. Just me and my beach ball belly together, we will conquer the horizon. It's not exactly a battle cry, but hey, good intentions matter too, right? As she barrels forward, the pungent scent of dust, sweat, and a faint whiff of barbecue, courtesy of yesterday's forgotten lunch, wafts through the air. Why does it always smell like barbecue when I'm trying to outrun imminent doom? She thinks, marching through the chaos in a haze of absurdity. Clara knows this isn't a fairy tale, yet she imagines herself leading her very own epic adventure, a comedic hero in a absurdly gritty story. Oh, for the love of mustard. This will make for the best dinner table story, if we survive, she mutters, determined to push through every clumsy panic-filled step. One day, I'll be able to tell my child how I almost became a human pinball during a Comanche raid. That should certainly make them proud. And just as they seem to hit the peak of chaos, as she fumbles ahead, her heart thundering like a marching band offbeat, Clara finds an element of strength swelling within her, a flicker of defiance against chaos itself. So, fate, she muses as shadows draw nearer. Let's see if I can make it to safety before I survive a new blend of frontier cardio I never signed up for. What she doesn't know is that humor and calamity have been her unfailing allies through this wild affair, and perhaps her rendition of motherhood has only just begun amidst the urgency of the moment. Chapter 20: Thunderous Hooves of Lawlessness. Now, let's talk about the ground shaking beneath your feet. The earth trembles like it's auditioning for the role of the world's most temperamental symphony conductor. Those thunderous hooves you hear? Yes, you guessed it, Comanche warriors are on their way, laughing and whooping with the kind of enthusiasm normally reserved for a summer carnival. Only here, the game is not musical chairs, but figuring out how to survive the next few minutes with your sense of dignity intact. You find yourself in the middle of the Texas frontier, 1836, and its crises galore. In a matter of moments, your serene life of tending to crops and dreaming of the latest gossip has devolved into a chaotic chase scene from an incredibly low-budget action flick. Apparently, your aspirations of sipping sweet tea while pretending to be a pioneer woman of grace are promptly dashed. Instead, you are alternatively dodging arrows and flagging down your family's survival instincts like a lost tourist in a desert without a map or a good pair of shoes. Picture it, you and fellow settlers are sprinting across stretches of rocky terrain, the scent of dust filling your lungs, mingling disturbingly with the smell of your breakfast. Those burnt biscuits you merely shelved aside an hour ago because you thought, how bad could it get? Spoiler, it could get pretty bad. And now, those biscuits may be the least of your issues. Oh, but just as you're trying to mentally tally the groceries you might need if you survive, here, decide to compose a ballad about your plight. It's a classic case of what do I pack for a Comanche raid? Your options are limited, bread rolls or weapons. Spoiler alert, neither will help you much now, but don't worry, you can just make a survival playlist for later. As you run, the rhythmic thundering of hooves fills your ears, overlapping with laughter that sounds disconcertingly like merry bells. A Comanche raiding party isn't exactly the cheerful picture you envisioned when you thought of a typical Texas morning. They seem to be treating this entire escapade as their personal rodeo, one where the stakes are life, limb, and maybe a few horses, if they're particularly lucky. You realize that your life has turned into an absurd game of tag. Except this time, it is the very real threat of being captured, and your only companions are your dubious survival skills and the distant memory of an uneventful day churning butter. Suddenly, forgetting the butter doesn't seem so important. Must run faster than a startled armadillo. You mutter under your breath, although let's be real. If you actually encounter an armadillo, you might just take a moment to learn its secrets instead. Speaking of which, aren't we all just trying to outrun our responsibilities and obligations? Who knew this day would prompt you to rethink your entire approach to life decisions? Am I eating well enough? Are my linens freshly pressed? Oh wait. Those questions seem trivial now, when a Comanche raid raises, the stakes getting run over is not exactly on the to-do list. Noticing the riders swooping around, cutting off your escape routes, their horses moving with such grace, you feel like you're on the wrong end of a tragic comedy. It'd almost be entertaining, if not for the fact you're imagining yourself in the blooper reel. You're the main character, but your ridiculousness is not quite ready for a Hollywood spotlight. It's like watching a marathon of your least preferred sitcom. It's bad, but you can't look away. Every high-pitched whoop sends shivers down your spine as they mockingly circle you and your fellow settlers, their synchronized galloping akin to a well-rehearsed dance routine. Is this the new Texas version of Dancing with the Stars? You can't help but think, why didn't I sign up for something less dangerous? Do they offer Comanche raid survival classes on the side of the frontier? But just as that thought crosses your mind, your feet are reminding you that running while simultaneously assessing the social dynamics of your adversaries is simply not possible. Your legs scream for mercy as the Comanche warriors seem to advance like an army of fast food mascots keen on a chaotic eatery brawl. One glance back tells you that the gap between safety and calamity is only increasing. Okay, let's do this. You whisper to the bewildered settlers trailing behind like a confused herd of well-meaning sheep. You know, if we survive this, we could open a survival school. Running away, 101. Tips from a Comanche raid. You laugh awkwardly, only to wonder if the thought will get you in trouble with the Great Committee of Settlers' Humor Appraisal. Surprisingly, your group seems to find a smidgen of grit as the absurdity of the moment starts to shine through. One day, we'll be telling stories about this. Assuming we're not captured and added to their roll of honor. Some of them snicker nervously, finding solace in your off-kilter remarks, as laughter is the best defense against imminent doom, or so you've heard. Who thought the frontier life would involve dance battles and a fleeing tour of the countryside? You quip, huffing as you dodge yet another onslaught of conflict. If you escape, you might just have enough stories to fuel an entire apocalypse series on survival, with just a hint of comedy. And as the thunderous hooves approach and laughter reverberates, somehow, amidst the dire stakes, you're reminded that life, much like this absurd chase, can be humorously unpredictable. If only you could outrun your own sense of impending doom. Chapter 21. A hasty abduction. Let's immerse ourselves in a peculiar moment specifically. That awkward moment when you realize your peaceful day just went south faster than a confused chicken during a hurricane. Picture it. Your heart's racing louder than a drummer at a rock concert. As you dart through the dust-choked landscape of the Texas frontier, you've got plans for the day, maybe some light harvesting, perhaps a stroll to visit the neighbor who always borrows your favorite squirrel figurine without returning it, but, surprise, all those plans just fast-forwarded into a spin-off of a horror film. As you huddle behind a dusty tree stump, breathing like you just finished an impromptu marathon, you spot someone out of the corner of your eye. It's not a neighbor. It's not even the neighbor's cat, flaunting its conquest of the local mouse community. No, it's a fleet of Comanche warriors, and they're whooping and hollering like it's carnival time in July. Great, just great. Did someone flip the script on life? Because the last chapter was supposed to be settler's peace, not run for your life. But amid this chaos, there's one moment that stands out, a heart-stopping, swinging from the chandeliers kind of moment. Enter Cynthia Ann Parker, a 9-year-old girl who's balancing innocence with the sort of curious bravery that makes grown folks look like they just had a triple espresso. Now, dear listener, imagine seeing that pint-sized dynamo sprinting and dodging, a wisp of hair trailing behind her like a tiny comet made of sheer determination. As she runs, her breath clouds in front like a little smoke signal pleading for someone to notice that she's not just another daydream swept away in the Texas wind. And then time's whoosh, asterisk out of nowhere. A formidable warrior swoops down on horseback, moving faster than a gossip spreading through a sewing circle. Yes, it's like watching a stunt show that took a wrong turn into reality. One moment, Cynthia is running, and the next, poof. It's like she's a balloon that someone decided to pop right into space. The warrior reaches out with a hand, and in a true feat of comic absurdity, he lifts her effortlessly like she's some kind of featherweight champion in a very unfair wrestling match. Ever seen a cat pick up a careless mouse? Well, imagine that, only with way more existential dread involved. For a fleeting second, all you can think is, I really hope she had breakfast, because this isn't great for the digestive system. As she's tossed across the horse like last week's laundry, you can almost hear her thoughts. Well, this certainly wasn't in my plans to get abducted today. How do I file for this in my diary? Now, let's explore the implications of being whisked away in such a dramatic fashion. Imagine the internal debate: do I scream? Do I wave my arms? Is this what a midlife crisis feels like as a child? And as she bounces against the warrior, who's galloping away as if auditioning for Texas's next big rodeo, you can practically visualize her mental checklist. Head, shoulders, knees, and oh dear, no bear in sight. Why wasn't I prepared for this? And speaking of preparation, dear listener, let's pause for a moment and reflect on your own kitchen disasters. Have you ever tried making dinner, only for chaos to rain down like an ill-timed thunderstorm? Could you match the intensity of trying to save a soufflé on the verge of collapse with young Cynthia Ann's current predicament? Sorry, Mom, cooking dinner is hard when you're dodging warriors on horseback. Meanwhile, the Comanche's ecstatic shouting motif continues as if they're at the apex of some ridiculous game show and, spoiler alert, you're not winning any prizes today, Cynthia. Each whoop is like a playful jab at your daydreams of a perfectly mundane life where you're simply chasing your dog around the yard or helping Grandma make peach preserves. As the horses gallop away, kicking up dust, the world around them transforms. The vast horizon of the Texas plains stretches endlessly, filled with the scent of sun-baked earth mixed with adventure and a touch of sheer mischief. Ever tried to navigate through high stakes like this? It's like stumbling into a family reunion with entirely too much awkwardness crammed into a single afternoon. Now, think back on your last holiday dinner. Remember when Uncle Bob brought his infamous potato salad that looked suspiciously like it had been mixed by a puppy? You could almost apologize to that innocent dish next to Cynthia, because she's about to serve up a story to rival those overcooked potatoes. They say laughter is the best medicine. You might think, but all of a sudden, you're in a top-tier comedy where you're both the audience and the unfortunate lead. And as she's whisked off into the horizon kidnapped, no less you can practically hear the universe asking, what on earth was in her breakfast cereal? It's a reminder, shouted through the kaleidoscope of time. Life's curveballs will always throw you for a spin. And if you find yourself on the wrong side of a dramatic horse chase, always remember, humor is most definitely a survival strategy. Because when you're dealing with Comanche raids and the tragic comedy of life, you can either worry about what comes next, or accept that your new niche may just land you in the unexpected adventures of Cynthia. And who knows, if you keep that spirit intact, your next career may start with an unexpected chapter introduction that might involve a Comanche horse, an unconventional friendship, and potentially a reference to a potato salad that never quite got the attention it deserved. So here we are, caught in a moment that's as entertaining as it is terrifying, a vivid reminder that life, much like a Comanche raid, is never quite what you plan it to be. Chapter 22, The Ground is Not Your Friend. Welcome back, brave listener. Your journey tonight is about to take a turn more unexpected than finding your well-intended casserole turned into a science experiment in the back of the fridge. Buckle up, because we're diving into the heart-pounding chaos of a Comanche raid, where the stakes are higher than your neighbor's Christmas lights that somehow remain up year-round. Imagine this, it's 1836, and you've managed to conjure the very essence of frontier life days spent under the blistering sun, engaging in chores that often feel like trying to paint a house with a toothpick. One moment, you're enjoying a rare moment of calm, and the next, you're launching yourself into a situation so absurd it feels like you've traded in your life for a quirky sitcom. Like frying a Thanksgiving turkey, sure, it might sound like a good idea, but somewhere along the way, someone's going to need a fire extinguisher. So let's lay the scene. Perhaps you have your well-worn homestead. That charming little abode, which let's be honest has probably seen better days. The floors creak at the very idea of you stepping too hard, and the walls might host more little creatures than you care to admit. We'll call it rustic charm for now, because it's about to be completely destroyed by raiders as a way of ruining dinner parties. Suddenly, as you bend over to tie your boot, try not to blame it on the in-laws. The first whoops of a Comanche contingent cut through the air like your Aunt Edna's unsolicited advice on how to raise your children. A wave of panic crashes over you with all the finesse of a toddler on roller skates. It begins not with a bang, but with an almighty realization. Your very existence has just had the dramatic stakes raised to critical levels. And here you are, racing through the dust, inhaling a concoction of dirt and fear that makes your breakfast burrito seem like a 5-star Michelin delight. You hear rustling, a rapid thump of hooves approaching, the kind that sends you racing behind the nearest tree stump, which, by the way, has as much tactical advantage as a wet napkin in a food fight. Your heart races. You could almost plant a garden from all the adrenaline this moment is producing. Alas, it gets better. A pregnant settler nearby, caught in the chaotic drama of the moment, is knocked to the ground, times like a human piñata minus the candy-filled payout. She curls into a fetal position, a desperate attempt to protect her unborn child as if she's trying to play hide and seek with the universe itself. But Earth beneath her becomes a hard and unyielding adversary. You can almost hear the cosmic chuckle of fate. Surprise! Your quiet life was too good to be true. Now, here's where the narrative hits a ridiculous peak. Imagine the poor woman glancing around, trying her best to defy all odds, while also not focusing too hard on the unfortunate sight of a nearby mutilated body. Talk about a scene switch that feels less like a gentle transition and more like a complete costume change during a theatrical performance. Have you ever gone to the bathroom, only to find a bathroom horror movie happening instead? Yeah, it's like that, only gorier, and without the promise of popcorn afterward. And yet, here you are, caught in this whirlwind, trying to process the absurdity that often punctuated history with a capital H. What was her face telling you? Fear? Courage? Or perhaps indistinct confusion, resembling that moment when you try to solve a family puzzle only to realize half the pieces are missing, and your uncle is quietly eating the remaining edges? As she curls up against the unyielding earth, you might find yourself marveling at the contrasts her situation juxtaposed with modern life, where setbacks can range from tripping over a shoelace to realizing your favorite coffee shop is out of oat milk. At least she's not breaking a nail trying to swipe on a dating app, am I right? And you thought adulting was hard? Try surviving a Comanche raid, you'll walk away with a sense of accomplishment that could rival a degree in professional procrastination. But amidst all this chaos, the raw depth of this moment reflects something unspeakably heroic. It's an absurd reality where humor and horror entwine with the resilience of the human spirit, much like trying to maintain composure while a 3-year-old executes a tantrum worthy of an Academy Award. Can you hear it? The battle cries crescendo, filling the world like the recurring theme of an overzealous opera. It's as if every note is an invitation to catastrophe. Join us for drama. Admission is just your sanity. In that moment, you might wonder, if you were in a sitcom, would this be the point where the laugh track would chime in, or is it too somber for comedy? As we dive deeper into this chaotic world, we must marvel at the absurdity of existence itself. It's a tapestry woven with unpredictable threads, each stitch a story of courage, folly, survival, and more than a hint of slapstick humor, if only viewed through the lens of the hilariously unfortunate. Because when you're facing a Comanche raid, every decision to fight or flee transforms into a cosmic punchline. Sometimes, just surviving the night is the greatest joke of all. So, dear friend, second-guess your choices and wonder if your daily inconveniences truly compare. Now, let's see what other humorously tragic predicaments await in this tale. Hold on tight, for we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of what it means to weather the most entertaining storm this side of the 19th century. Chapter 23. The hair-tugging reality of settler life. Welcome back, illustrious dreamers. Tonight, we plunge into a moment thick with tension, and more hair-raising than your aunt's tales of how she survived a hurricane with nothing but a soup can and sheer determination. Get ready. We're about to witness the full extent of the absurd, tragic, and, frankly, chaotic experiences of life on the Texas frontier in 1836, where every day might start with a bang but end in more drama than a soap opera marathon. Imagine, if you will, that you have just woken up, not in your comfy bed with your heating blanket on, but in a scrappy homestead that's more haphazard than a game of Jenga played by toddlers. Your bones creak, not just from the hard mattress made from the world's most stubborn bales of hay, but also from every little adventure that has led to this moment. Ah, to be a settler in the Texas wilderness, where a morning routine might involve wrestling with a goat that believes your breakfast is its breakfast. But let's get back to the chaos awaiting you. Cue the galloping hoofbeats. When you hear them, a pit the size of Texas forms in your stomach. Oh, sweet velvet cake, not today. Welcome to a world where the winds simplify communication to heart-stopping whoops and volleys of gunfire. Think of it as living in a reality TV show, but instead of contestants competing for prize money, they're vying for survival against the Comanche. And let's just say the stakes are higher than your aspirations to find a good Wi-Fi signal in the wilderness. Now, as you catch whiffs of smoke, sweat, and dare I say drama of impending doom, let's transition into a scene so intense it'll pull your heartstrings faster than a clumsy toddler at a birthday party. Suddenly, you're there, witnessing a young settler woman, clinging onto the last shred of sanity while grappling with her hair-tugging captor. Yes, you heard that right. The wilds of Texas might have seemed pure poetic chaos, but it was really more akin to a bad hair day turned fatal. Her captor roughly tugs at her hair, wrenching her head around like she's the centerpiece of some misguided art installation. Look, he screams, nearly spilling his well-practiced villain monologue. And, oh, what a sight it is. There lies her Uncle Benjamin, unfortunate soul, now enjoying his eternal rest a little times 2 times vividly. His once animated stories of frontier misadventures now silenced, the meaning perhaps a tad too clear echoes through the air. Resist, and this might just be your future, too. And isn't history just a riot? You have your run-of-the-mill, Aunt May lost her cat drama, and then boom times you have spooky Uncle Ben just got a permanent vacation from life. All while the irony hangs heavier than that sizzling pork belly you're trying to resist at dinner. What was it like to be in her shoes, you wonder, waiting, hoping for some miracle, perhaps the ghost of Benjamin himself would rise to have a word or two about life decisions. Maybe even offer some insights on how to improve 0-star reviews. Alas, hope is a distant memory on the frontier. But let's get real there, shall we? What do you do at a time like this? Do you throw all rational thought to the wind and start composing a dramatic ballad about your troubles? Maybe. Or you can follow the lead of those who came before you, stubbornly digging in your heels like trying to avoid a line at Starbucks when you need caffeine, because survival is all about quick thinking and even quicker reflexes. And let's be clear, faint-heartedness was not an option. Forget about sharing your feelings over artisanal desserts. Here, it's about navigating the sheer absurdity of life, while realizing that the outside world is basically a horror movie directed by fate itself. The irony of being truly times, hair-raising times, takes on an entirely different meaning in this context. But here's where humor rears its lovely head amid calamity. Imagine bustling settlers having to pivot not only to save their own lives, but also their reputation by figuring out if this is just another entertaining storytelling moment for future campfire chats. Oh, a few Comanche raiders came by, snagged some goats, and Uncle Benjamin decided to take the day off on his eternal holiday. Today was pretty average, really. You might never understand the atmosphere of panic mixed with resilience quite like this. One misstep can lead to limbs flying, or, worse yet, being introduced to the unforgiving arms of history. So those settling on the frontier, experiencing life as a circus, act walking a tightrope with no net, lean into their two options, fight or run. And let's be honest, running sounds easier unless you have a bum knee or a goat that insists on following you home. And just when it feels like everything teeters on an edge sharper than a bad pun, amidst the chaos comes the laughter of survival, the type that redefines self-preservation with a sprinkle of irony. Because in the face of confusion, what's better than confronting fate with a dark chuckle and a stiff upper lip? So, there you are, dear listener, immersed in untamed history, where every decision is a cosmic punchline crafted by the universe itself. That, after all, is the beautifully absurd essence of existence on the Texas frontier, an opportunity to laugh through life's misadventures, even when it feels like you're moments away from tumbling down the rabbit hole of absurdity again. Buckle up, the night is still young. Chapter 24, Roping the Unpleasant, a Comanche Encounter. Picture this, your wrists, raw and sore, chafing against strips of rough rawhide that feel like they were woven from the last angry cactus in Texas. You're sprawled out not in a luxury hotel king bed with fluffy pillows and the promise of room service, or even a rogue taco stand, but instead, a makeshift plot of dirt that could make a hog feel more comfortable. The last thing you want is to be stuck in this predicament, wondering if you should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque instead of uprooting your entire life to tame the wild frontier. But what's this? Your captor, one of the Comanche, a fierce individual who seems to have a personal vendetta against anything that smells remotely like laundry, has left you momentarily. As they ransack what's left of the fort, you can't help but admire the chaos they bring with them. Like a toddler who just discovered a crayon box in a white-walled nursery. Every object is turned, every tin can smashed, and all the contents are scattered like they just had their own personal hurricane. Beware, world, for that's what a Comanche raid looks like. A tornado but without the chintzy soundtrack or post-storm weather report. You start to wonder, what is it like to be roasted alive by the sun only to then have your life whisked into this mess? Like living in a particularly violent episode of Time's Survivor, but instead of winning $1 million and a trip to Fiji, you're merely playing for your life and possibly a few leftover beans that have now seen better days. The pungent aroma of sweat mixed with something akin to singed feathers wafts through the air, a delightful bouquet, if you will. But really, if you've ever tried to cook dinner and set off the smoke alarm, imagine that intensified 1,000-fold. Suddenly, your stomach, not to mention it still being tied to your person, declares war on you. What was supposed to be breakfast is now just a distant memory, alongside dreams of a quiet morning with coffee and a warm croissant. Sure, you could reach for an unusual snack, a rock perhaps, but alas, your hands are bound worse than your neighbor's misguided New Year's resolutions. Is it too soon for a pun about being tied up in a situation? Maybe, but truthfully, frontiersfolk had a knack for finding humor in calamity. Why not embrace it? The horror is kind of like the plot of a bad rom-com, where you try to convince yourself that it'll all work out in the end. And then, nothing exploded, and we lived happily ever after. Sigh, probably not true. As your captor rummages through the fort like a kid on Christmas morning, you get a moment to ponder the life choices that led to your current predicament. You think about those settlers back home, gathering for a potluck, wondering if anyone would believe your story of being nearly abducted by Comanche raiders. So, guys, I was popped right out of my NC homestead while churning butter, and no, I didn't get to bring the butter along. The ludicrousness of it strikes you, and you can't help but chuckle softly. Just remember, laughter is the best medicine unless you're seriously injured, in which case, it's more like the second best medicine after actual medicine. Now, let's talk about the chaotic scene that unfolds. Perhaps it's a little unfair to stereotype your captor as the only one capable of stylish hat design. Their magnificent feathered plume sways bold and bright, while you crouch with no sense of personal flair whatsoever, just dangling headbands and half-torn dresses screaming, unfashionably captured. Sometimes, it feels like they have an unfair advantage over you, complete with scenes straight out of a Wild West painting. Now, let's not forget the wails of their comrades in the distance, blending into a cacophony that is both alarming and oddly reminiscent of a jam session gone wrong. Hey, let's group scream for no reason. Knowing precisely when to panic is crucial here. Do you join the Brotherhood of Screams? Or is it too early to make that call? It's a delicate balance between looking brave and making sure no one's preparing an impromptu theatrical performance out of your imminent doom. Your captor suddenly turns back to you, sweeping the room with a fierce glare, as if considering an audition for Time's America's Next Top Comanche Leader, asterisk. The terrifying truth hits you that they're possibly deciding your fate based on which way the wind blows, or if they left the house without their good hat. What do you do? Do you attempt to charm them with some witty repartee? I see you're ransacking my home, how's that working out for you? Ever considered relocation to a cozy cabin instead? Probably not the best idea, unless you're hoping to earn a swift award for bravery, or the opposite, of course. And, as your captor moves out of sight, your heart does a process, little jump for joy, thinking about escape. Like an acrobat rehearsing for their great fallen act of grace, you begin wiggling your way towards the cozy shelter at the edge of the fort that promises absolutely nothing. However, one small step closer to freedom feels like triumph. You can almost taste it, like the last slice of cake mysteriously left behind at the party, just a few tasty bites away from a glorious savior. But before you could even dream of what freedom might taste like, perhaps reminiscent of your beloved fried chicken, it suddenly occurs to you that capers may never be your best friend again. Life will forever be a series of unending absurdities, without a protective boundary against calamity, and attempting to run away might raise some flags. So, as you sit there, bound, and with your mind racing faster than a Gold Rush era show pony, you ponder, should I stay or should I go? Ah, the timeless question every captive human faces. Perhaps if you chant it loud enough during the next dramatic moment, the universe will hear you. Or maybe, just maybe, the wilds of Texas will solidify your decision to become a storyteller instead. Buckle up, folks. Things are about to get more comedic than chaotic, and you know, that's just the way life rolls on the American frontier. Chapter 25. A horse of a different color. Ah, the moment of truth. You're strapped to a horse, not the majestic steed of cowboy dreams, but more like a dappled mare that has absolutely no concept of personal space or manners. You bounce awkwardly against the saddle, feeling all the delightful charms of the Texas frontier, which, spoiler alert, isn't much. Your wrists are still bound, and your teeth, yes, those charming little pearls, are busy wondering if a trip to the dentist might be in your future after their recent run-in with your cheek. Let's set the scene. The sun is screaming down at you like an angry relative on Christmas morning, the yellow rays mixing with the dust kicked up by a ragtag band of Comanche riders, all weaving a colorful tapestry of chaos behind you. It smells like burnt leather and questionable decisions. With a hint of something unmistakably alarming, even the horse beside you seems unimpressed by the situation. If only it could roll its eyes. And just when you think respite could be on the horizon, a miracle of sorts, a Comanche warrior thrusts you over the saddle, making it abundantly clear that this isn't a friendly invitation to brunch. No, this is akin to being served a lukewarm platter of regret. You glance back at the fort you're being spirited away from, and the last vestige of your cozy life dashes off like it just remembered it left a pot of beans on the stove. Now, the Comanche themselves are an impressive bunch, clad in vibrant colors and adorned with jewelry that would put a department store on clearance sale to shame. They gallop with an enthusiasm that would make most rodeo clowns rethink their life choices. But you're the not-so-gracious prize in this high-speed drama, much like a day-old fruitcake left over from last Christmas. What do you imagine the average Comanche is thinking right now? Is it something philosophical, like, what is the meaning of existence? Or perhaps, I really should have warned them about that cactus. No, it's more likely a straightforward consideration of their next meal and how quickly they can get this famous settler stir-fry prepared for the evening. And speaking of evening meals, can we just mention the fact that it's been a hot minute since you've had anything that resembles food? While your stomach growls louder than a disgruntled bear, you can't help but think about how convenient a pizza delivery app would be right now. I'll take a large. Sorry, I'm a captive with extra toppings, and please hurry. As you sway precariously on the horse, your mind is racing. What if someone actually decided to come rescue you? Congratulations, they would either need the bravery of a lion or the plotting skills of a soap opera villain. The twist is, what if nobody even noticed you were gone? You can just imagine the townsfolk continuing to sip their coffee and exchange homemade pie recipes, completely oblivious to your stirring tale of woe unfolding just a few miles down the dusty trail. Did Mary ever get that sourdough nailed down? Bless her heart, she never had a knack for baking. But let's get real for a moment. What does it feel like to be quite literally swept off your feet by a crew of raiders intent on rewriting your plans for a peaceful existence? It's like buying a one-way ticket to nowhere with no travel insurance and the nagging suspicion that you've left the oven on at home. Panic creeps in, alongside embarrassment, and you begin to wonder just how much they'd pay you if you suddenly announced a retreat into interpretive dancing to express your feelings, instead of clinging onto that horse for dear life. The rush of the wind fills your ears, a cacophony that drowns out even the most soothing sounds like the gentle lapping of ocean waves, or possibly that new age music they play in calming yoga classes. Picture the scene, you clinging to a horse like it might double as a therapy animal, looking desperately for something to anchor your sanity amid this uproar. Meanwhile, your new captors are not only excellent equestrians, but also seem to have an endless supply of high-energy chaos. In the distance, mounted warriors shout animatedly to each other as they strategize your illustrious path toward, well, wherever they usually go when abducting settlers. The thrill of adventure feels like an overhyped roller coaster, exciting until you realize it's just going in a circle and the drop you've been anticipating isn't exactly coming. As you hang there, clinging to your salty dignity while dangling like a piñata at a poorly planned birthday party, it dawns on you that maybe, just maybe, this will make for one heck of a story someday. Hey, kids, gather round for the bedtime story of the time I got horsewhipped into captivity by Comanche raiders after merely needing some milk for breakfast. Every jolt sends your body into new contortions, a grand acrobatic display that would have easily earned you the participation trophy in the completely unqualified to survive a raid event. But deeper within the digestive malaise and panic, some wild spark of humor emerges. Perhaps one day, you'll be able to laugh at it like the day your cousin tried to barbecue ribs in a storm and nearly caught the entire neighborhood on fire. Was it more chaos than anyone could handle? You bet it was. And just like that, the dust settles, the horse trots along, the drama thickens, and you're left reflecting that surviving a Comanche raid might not put you at the top of the Yelp review list. But hey, at least you'll have a good story for the grandkids. It's enough to make you chuckle, or at least, as much as your swollen cheek will allow. Now, if only there was a healing balm for absurd adventures too. And now, as the dust settles on our long walk through the Texas frontier, let your breath soften, let the noise fade, and let the past drift like a slow breeze across open grasslands. We've wandered through cabins that creaked with cold and worry, forts held together by splinters, hope, and a few questionable nails, mornings filled with burnt corn mush, restless livestock, and neighbors who panicked louder than they planned. We've felt the pounding fear of hoofbeats on the plains, and the strange, unexpected humor that always seemed to slip in during chaos, because sometimes laughter is all people had to keep themselves steady. Those families, tired, hungry, sunburned, and often terrified, still woke up every day, faced the horizon, and chose to keep going. They didn't have soft blankets or safe rooms. They didn't have lights that flicked on with a switch. They didn't have locks, heaters, fans, or the comforting hum of the modern world. But they had resilience. They had stubbornness. They had each other. And in the midst of danger and absurdity, they still found room for jokes, shared meals, and tiny bright moments of humanity. So tonight, honor them. Honor the settlers who struggled, the Comanche riders who mastered the land. Everyone who survived days harsher than anything we can imagine. Days where comfort was rare and peace was fragile. And then, feel grateful. For your bed, for your warmth, for the quiet around you, for walls that don't shake, and nights that don't listen for hoofbeats. Let your muscles loosen. Let your thoughts grow soft. Let the long frontier fade into the darkness behind your eyelids. You're safe. You're warm. You've traveled far enough tonight. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift gently into sleep.